Few minutes, guys. Wait for a few more people to trickle in. Okay, I think we're going to get started. We may have a few more people trickle in as we get started today, but I know we have a packed agenda and I want to make sure we start on time for all those sessions. So, I guess I'd like to thank everybody for coming in today for today's Cybersecurity and Privacy Day. It's kind of the first time we've kind of merged the two activities into the same event. We'll probably do another round of this in the fall, but this is kind of a spring one to, get the blood flowing for the summer. For anybody who isn't aware, I'm Emery Shulek. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer and the Senior Official for Privacy here at CMS. I've been here for about 2.5 years now and looking forward to continuing the great work that we've been accomplishing here. So I'd like to really start and thank the vendors and the professionals who've come in here from industry and from the government to help make this a successful event. It's really an opportunity for us to kind of have a deeper conversation, explore some, key topics a little bit more, and build our understanding of where the cyber and privacy challenges are within the organization. I'd also like to, offer a special thanks to my entire team for pulling this together, and particularly Kimberly Hemby, who is kind of the lead for pulling all of this together for us and really making it, hopefully a memorable event for everybody. Today's event really is focused around two key goals: raising everyone's awareness of the risks and challenges in cybersecurity and privacy, and really increasing the dialogue around key issues in today's environment. One of the things that I've been lucky to participate in recently is, for the last year, I've been the co-chair of the Healthcare Industry Cybersecurity Task Force. The task force was established in December 2015 through the Cybersecurity Act of 2015 Act to work with industry and really discuss the key cybersecurity issues facing the healthcare sector. And I think, what you really need to think about as you're going through the day and you're having these discussions is that, so many times, cybersecurity and privacy, maybe less privacy, but more cybersecurity, it's really seen historically as an IT problem. This is IT. IT guys solve this. IT people solve this, this issue going forward. And really, the one message that I guess the task force really wants, the industry to really kind of reconsider the position and rethink about how we talk about this, and understand that, cybersecurity and privacy is not an IT issue. It's a business issue. It's a mission issue. Are we able to deliver the services and the capabilities we want? It's about, patient safety. It's about being able to deliver key resources. So you may not feel like you personally have this, connection of what you're doing to patient safety, but remember, so much of our industry is small businesses, and they rely on payments to make sure that they can deliver home health services. If we do not get payments out in a timely manner, somebody may not get that necessary healthcare service at home. There are other ways that you can look at it, but I think you really need to be thinking that cybersecurity and privacy is about delivering services, delivering the CMS mission successfully and securely. We have over 100 million, records of individuals across the, U.S. government, across the U.S. employees, U.S. Citizens. And it's really important that we secure that information. We make it, we don't lose confidence from the public for patient safety, and that we can really build a strong and successful mission. So, just to kind of summarize, I don't want to go on too long today. I just want to summarize some of the things that we've seen recently within CMS. One of the big things that we did in the last 2 months is release the spam button. We released a spam button into everyone's Outlook folder. So if you go into Outlook, in the menu bar, you can now see a spam folder for reporting spam. Just to give you an impression of what a difference that has made, we've had a 340% increase in the number of spam messages reported to CMS. And basically 75% of those messages are now coming from the spam button, people being able to just highlight the email that they think is suspicious and sending it forward. So, we're continuing our biweekly exercises. We continue to hit, industry lows in terms of people being fooled or tricked by phishing exercises, although I'll say they were very successful this week. Usually we are in a 1% to 2% range. Maybe this week we might hit 5% with a phishing exercise this week. But overall, we've been very successful, and it's really important that, the cybersecurity exercise biweekly seems a bit of a chore, but we are consistently the best performer in HHS. We are, well above industry standards for phishing reporting, and it really is our last line of defense. There's only so much that you can automate. There's only so many automated protections and filters and other pieces of gadgetry that we can put between you and a malicious attacker on the outside. And in the end, spam continues to be, or phishing emails continue to be, a primary source of attack for organizations, particularly government organizations, but in industry as well. So on average, just to give you guys an idea, we have at least 14 phishing emails that get through all of our technical filters. Every single block, every single automated check that we have, there's still about 14 that we identify, and a lot of those 14, or the vast majority of those 14, are identified with the help of everybody reporting those emails to the spam phishing, with the spam phishing button or the spam mailbox. So just to give you, an idea, one of the things that we also want to do is kind of improve that process. I know a lot of people have asked, it's like, well, how can I get responses to that spam button? I send it, I hit it maybe 5 times or 10 times today. How do I get that? Unfortunately, it really isn't practical for us to respond to every single one. We get thousands of emails reported to us every week. If we were to try to respond to every single one, it just would be kind of overwhelming. We do have to do research. We do get them grouped up, and we do. So one of the things that we are looking at in the next month or two is to start publishing on our website the false positive phishing emails. So these are the emails that people report to us and are legitimate emails from CMS, from HHS, from some program, We're not probably going to focus too much on, you clearly saw this as an advertising email. We get a lot of those onesies and twosies. We might not have all of those on the list, but we'll have the really obvious ones that are, I wasn't sure if this was a legitimate HHS email. And to be clear, I'd say a good number of the emails that we get as reported spam messages tend to come from HHS, actually, from HR or other programs, and people just aren't aware. But there's a lot of programs within our own side that can do this. So one, it will give you some kind of feedback. If you see something, you can go check the list in the next week and see, did I report it? Is it one of the ones that was caught, or is it just kind of a false positive from the organization? The second thing is, if you're a program and you check the list and you see all of your emails consistently be reporting by the staff as being, phishing attacks, you might want to reconsider how you're delivering your messages, because, they're not really getting through, and people are really highlighting those as suspicious. So that's one of the things that we're going to be doing with the phishing exercises this week, or in the next month. The other thing I wanted to talk about today is the progress we're making with CFAX. So CFAX is our tool for our federal reporting. So CFAX is basically the core tool that we use for things like monitoring, processing authorizations to operate. It is the tool we use for weakness remediation, tracking weakness remediation. It's our tool for tracking information exchange agreements. Information sharing agreements between systems. So it really is a kind of a key thing. And this summer we plan on rolling out a new version of CFAX. But I want to highlight kind of, how does this fit within the bigger picture? And recently in the news, hopefully people have really seen, we've got a lot of emphasis both within the government, but also visible within industry, of how cybersecurity is changing. And one of those key things is the cybersecurity executive order out of the administration. So, what does that really mean? We want to make sure that CFAX is updated and current, because we really want to rely a lot less on automated data calls, on data calls, and rely more on automated reporting of data that we already have available to us. We've spent a couple years now cleaning up that data and making it better. But I think some of the things that you're going to really see as a CMS, as an organization, is that you're going to see a migration of what's being reported and what emphasis is going to be made to certain activities. And I guess one of the key things that you should really recognize is that in the cybersecurity executive order, the secretary is now accountable for the security for the entire department, and it can be held accountable for failures of the cybersecurity in the department. So what you see is kind of a new dynamic evolving between, visibility of what does that really mean, and CFAX is kind of one of those core tools for getting that information. I guess the WannaCry incident that we had about 2 weeks ago, we worked all weekend trying to work with the systems and the programs to kind of say, have you done your patching? Microsoft came out with patching in March, and sometimes that patching didn't occur because of business reasons. Sometimes it didn't occur because it failed on installation. Some of it occurred. But what we really saw as a result of that activity and the cybersecurity executive order is that, look, now the secretary is responsible for it. As a result of WannaCry during that week, the secretary came out and said, look, you will patch, or you will take your system and sequester it from the internet and sequester it from connectivity to other systems. So you're seeing this kind of raised visibility. So I think, as we look at security and privacy, it's going to change how we do business. I guess one of the key things that the Cybersecurity Act really called out is, and it's kind of two pieces. It's the Cybersecurity Act, Cybersecurity Executive Order, as well as the high-value asset activities that are going on. Historically, we kind of treated a lot of systems similarly. We had the same kind of reporting. Yeah, it was high, moderate, or low, but it didn't have as much emphasis. So I think you're going to start seeing a greater emphasis on this. So just to give you guys an idea of what a high-value asset is, historically, when this started 2 years ago, a high-value asset, after the OPM breach was, well, anything that has, a large number of privacy records in it. And the government at the time defined that as, like 1 million records. It was like, and we kind of laughed. It was like, well, that would be pretty much every system that we own. So we kind of internally raised that bar to, let's call that maybe 30 or 40 million records to hit a high value classified. Otherwise, we're going to be classifying every system. So, 2 years ago, high value was really, it had privacy records that could be stolen. And it would be embarrassing for the government. It would frustrate us in accomplishing our mission. But between the Cybersecurity Act and the new OMB guidance for defining this, I just want to read you kind of how that's changed and how the dynamic is going to be changing this year. A system of which compromise would have significant impact to the United States' national security interests, foreign relations, economy, or to the public confidence, civil liberties, public health, and safety of the American people. I think we have quite a number of systems, and right now we have about 34 systems that fall under that category with our current definitions. We're going to be working across the organization to refine our high-value asset list. But when you look at the high-value assets and you look at our systems and you look at the cyber executive order, what does that really mean? You can think of that translating to two key things right now. You're going to get patched a lot more, and we're going to know exactly where your patching status is. And you're also going to be looking at our weakness remediation. We're going to say, what are your weaknesses? What are your weaknesses from audits? What are your weaknesses from self-assessments? What are your weaknesses from pen testing, penetration testing? What is your weakness from any source that's identified as we go forward? So I think, the conversation in cybersecurity definitely has up the ante with the cybersecurity executive order. I think you're going to see a lot more information coming out in the near future. I suspect we're going to see additional reports within the 90-day framework from the executive order. So we're expecting reports back out in the July timeframe. We have to provide data in the June timeframe to the department. The high value asset reporting goes into full swing and plans have to be in place by December of this year. So there's a lot of movement around this, and I think the conversation that you see here today is to say, let's talk about some of the challenges that we see, some of the opportunities that we see, and we've kind of broken it into 3 chains. So we're trying something a little different rather than just having a big room with briefings. We're giving you a little bit of variety if you have a little bit more of a technical wish, or if you have a little bit more of a thinking idea of risk, you can kind of go to the different areas. Just so you can see, if you look at your calendar, we have 3 rooms. It's this room, the following room. So the auditorium, which is this room, which is the middle one on the list. You've got the multi-purpose room, which is the room right behind us. And then you have the media room, which is at the end, which is the 3rd column on there. So you have choices of what you want to go attend. In addition to the 3 tracks that we offer today, we're going to get back together in this room to do a close-up. So we're going to start the day with security, and we're going to end the day with privacy. Matt from the department is here today to talk a little bit about privacy this afternoon. So hopefully everybody can stick around for the day and enjoy it. And, I guess if you have any questions, I'll go for 1 or 2 questions before we break or 1 question before we break. Okay, I think we're going to, Tom.
There's 4 stations set up outside to demo CFAX 3. If people want to stop by, they can take a look at CFAX 3.
Okay, as Tom said, there's several computers set up or stations set up to demonstrate CFAX 3, so you're welcome to look at that as an early glimpse of that today. In addition to that, I believe we have an ISSO event in the afternoon as well. So anything you want to wrap up with?
Yeah, just a couple things. Good morning, everybody. To support our training events for today, we have event guides, and so if there's any questions as we're moving through rooms, or you have any questions about the sessions, I'd like to ask the guides to stand up and refer you to them for any questions. I think Joanna, Kim, Bill Pollock, and Tiffany, I believe, is outside the door. Bill is waving, he's not standing. So they're available to help with any questions. Also, for the sessions that are just getting ready to kick off, the Navigating CMS IT Governance session will be held right in this room. So if you'd like to attend that session and registered, please stay put, and that will get started momentarily. The next room down that we're calling the multi-purpose room, that session is entitled Making Risk-Based Decisions. So that's just the next room over. And then the third room, the Media Center, that's going to be co-led by a vendor and one of our own CMS employees on cyber hygiene. So we can depart and start those sessions. I ask everybody to join us back for closing remarks. We'll be in this room. We'll have the benefit of hearing from our HHS Chief Privacy and Data Sharing Officer, Matt Olson. So we'll be back here to close the day. So enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks.
I noticed they gave us I think they gave us this but we were supposed to.
Yeah. I was gonna say somebody put their presentation.
Yeah. Somebody back there will
Yeah.
put it up there.
Yeah, Charlie's been. You guys feel free to turn your mic on now if you want to
It's all,
inject anything.
I'm not injecting it.
It's a tiny little button on the back.
Hello?
You're welcome.
Hi. Yes, I am. Hi, Ellen.
I've talked to you on the phone
Yes, we have.
today. I'm going to listen in. Hi, Kevin.
Hi.
I'm Ellen.
Hi, Ellen. Kevin.
Kevin, nice to see you again. You too.
Now it's back on.
Okay.
Test, test.
Testing, testing.
Hey, Chris.
All right, I think we're going to get started here pretty soon. Maybe 1 minute, give folks an opportunity to sit down, if they so choose.
He turned him off for 1 minute. Oh, no, he didn't.
We good to get started? Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. My name's Kevin Casey. I'm the Deputy Director for the Division of IT Investment Management and Policy. And we're going to have several different speakers this morning in the next 45-minute period or so. We'll end with George Linares, the Chief Technology Officer. So I was told, where's Kimberly? Is she here? She's not here? You know, I asked Kimberly what the audience would be for this morning's training, and she said it would exclusively be a bunch of cybersecurity and privacy geeks. So is that accurate, or? Yeah, okay. Okay, so for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to discuss a few things. How to navigate CMS IT governance, how the process is evolving, a lot of it just recently, and what the future of IT governance may look like. I'm going to give you a broad overview of governance, our XLC framework, why we do it, how we do it at CMS, and Pat Bellamy to my right is going to talk a little bit more about OIT intake, the CERT team, the CMS intake review team. That's kind of a critical piece, and I think it's appropriate to take a few minutes to talk through that, because that's essentially that's a point in time where we, as whether it's privacy and security, or whether it's other infrastructure, all the technical folks get an opportunity to have an early conversation with the business about what they want to build, why they want to build it, and what it's going to look like. So it's an early opportunity to influence the business on how they, how they build and what they build. And then Melissa's going to talk about Agile Transformation. That's something pretty exciting that's been going on. I know there's lots of discussion about Agile and what it is and what it isn't, and we have an initiative going on. We're doing some pretty cool things, and she'll talk a little bit about some of the pilots that are ongoing. And then George Linares, our Chief Technology Officer, will talk a little bit about the Technical Review Board and the key role that plays in the organization and in CMS IT governance. So hopefully after all four will have a few minutes for some Q&A, at least I hope. So I'll go ahead and get started. So we can, I guess, go to the first slide entitled Why Systems Development Life Cycles, Why IT Governance. And really, I'm not sure whether I did this slide some justice. I'm going to add a few things that probably weren't in the slide deck, but I think it'll all make sense. So, I mean, we have an SDLC. Our SDLC, System Development Lifecycle process, really is our XLC framework, and that's how we've kind of defined it here at CMS. We developed it probably 5 or 6 years ago. OIT, or I guess at the time it was probably OIS, and various components, business components got together, and we, with other best practices, we came up with the XLC, and there's formal training, there's documentation, and there's things on the internet that you can point to for training and some more information. But really, the SDLC, as well as IT governance, it's really about implementing best practices, mitigating risks, establishing standards, process standards and review standards. It's about objective evidence that influences and promotes investment value. If I would have to, and this really kind of isn't on this slide, but To summarize really what IT governance piece is, I would say that it really is a decision-making framework that optimizes business value through effective and efficient use of information technology. It's a risk reducer. It's a standard approach to decision-making. It focuses on visibility and transparency, not only of the product, but mainly of visibility and transparency into the decision-making process. There's budgetary formulation. There's IT investment selection process. So the funding and the prioritization of IT projects. What projects get selected? Which projects don't get selected? What's the criteria for that? And who makes those decisions? So, and again, I apologize. This is not on the deck, but I view IT governance as really having 3 legs. The first leg that supports IT governance is really all the supporting laws and policies and standards and statutes that we have to comply with. And many of those are security or privacy related. There's NIST and FISMA and HIPAA and FITARA and Klinger-Cohen, and all those policies really support IT governance. And then, if you go further down, there's, within CMS, there's, IS2P, which is our policy, which really incorporates much of the security and privacy policies, as well as the TRA, which is a technical reference architecture, and George is going to talk a little bit more about that. But they all support IT governance. And really the second leg, as I see it, is really a robust SDLC framework. And so for us at CMS, that robust SDLC framework is called the XLC, the Expedited Life Cycle. And that framework should support various development methodologies. It could be Agile, it could be Waterfall, it could be Spiral or POD or Scrum or any of the methodologies out there. Your framework should support that. And then the third leg, as I see it in IT, for IT governance really, and this is kind of the critical leg, which is there are investment review boards. And I'll just go over them very quickly, but there's the ITRB, the BATS, the ESC, the CERT, and the TRB. That's a lot of acronyms right there, but very quickly, the ITRB is the IT Investment Review Board, and it's really made up of like office level, center level directors. This is the top level leadership that are making the final decisions on what IT projects get funded and which ones perhaps don't. And they meet monthly or so and discuss strategic direction for the agency, supporting the mission, and which IT initiatives is most appropriate to support. So they kind of have the final say on budgetary things. And then under that, there's the BATS, which is the Business and Technology Solutions Board. That's kind of group level director, but it's both from OIS, or OIT, sorry, as well as the business side. And so that's kind of a level down from the ITRB. They help support the ITRB and usually have, a first crack at a particular issue that may be escalated. And then below that are ESCs, which really are the front line for those investment selection and prioritization discussions. And then the two below that really is the CERT and the TRB, or the TRB and CERT. The focus is for the CERT is really, this is the first time we're talking to the business about their project. So they come in the door, hopefully they're a year out from production or implementation, and we have some early discussions about what it is they want to do, why they want to do it, and maybe even have some early discussions about potential, technical solutions or even business solutions, leveraging other systems, leveraging other processes out there. So those are all early conversations we have with the business, and then kind of the rest of the life cycle, the rest of the XLC, the TRB kind of plays the role of reviewer and are they implementing their project according to kind of the rules of the XLC? Are there and really is somewhat of the maybe this is a strong word, but the enforcer, so to speak, of of IT governance, because to ensure that, that we review, that we're conforming and complying with all our internal rules and policies and procedures. So anyway, I apologize for going through it, but I think it's important that, to see or to communicate, how I see IT governance within CMS. The next slide, if we move on, is, this is kind of a diagram of the XLC that we've seen for years. Probably folks have seen this, and will this framework change? Will it look a little bit different in the future with the incorporation of agile and iterative approaches to system development? Probably the answer is yes, but will the core concepts of governance and establishing standards and security and privacy change? No, but maybe the way in which we implement those things. I think that there's a more of a focus on, embedding security, privacy, and other governance activities inside the teams. I think that's where the agile approach is going to, take us eventually. Not that any of those roles can be kind of avoided or worked around, but I think the way in which we implement them may change. I think the main thing that I wanted to focus on and show you here is that, our XLC kind of incorporates a lot of governance type activities in it. There are reviews. We take a look at complexity levels, 3 being the highest, and of course you have a few additional reviews in a complexity level 3 versus a complexity level 1. There's supporting artifacts for all these activities. And then, of course, these boxes represent various reviews, the bigger boxes being governance type reviews that usually happen most of the time at the TRB. But what I want to draw your attention to really is that the furthest to the left where it says CERT/BAR, and that's CMS Intake Review Team, as well as the Business Architecture Review activities. And that's, we consistently hear from folks from security and other areas, OAGM and others, that, well, if you need compliance for your stuff, how can the SDLC, how can this, activities revolving around IT governance and SDLC and XLC activities, how can they support that? And almost everybody says, well, we need to get to the business, early on. We need to tell them, what the, how to comply early on. We need to understand what it is they're trying to do and have early discussions. And I would just appeal to the group that the CERT is really that earliest discussion point where you can come in and have a conversation with the business and talk with other components within OIT, dealing with infrastructure and hosting and all the other kind of technical activities that are ongoing other than, security and privacy that need to kind of work together. And Pat's going to talk a little bit more in depth about that. So I think that's it. I'll turn it over to Pat, and she's going to focus the next few slides on the CERT.
Hi, I'm Pat Bellamy, and I will talk with you a little bit about the OIT intake process and the purpose of CERT. CERT is that initial touch point with our business IT community. CERT strives to support our IT community and maintains the highest quality standards as we strive to work toward our CMS goals and mission. CERT serves 2 purposes. One, it provides initial technical guidance, and 2, it ensures transparency and provides enterprise awareness for all IT activities. CERT's goal is to initiate partnerships with our business IT community, our subject matter experts within OIT, or group service representatives, GSRs that we call them. And we begin those discussions to have well-informed discussions on business and technical solutions. So we need your help with that. So what projects come through CERT? New IT projects, projects in operations and maintenance, those projects that require architectural changes, major changes in their technical approach, redesigns, those existing systems that require redesigns, those systems that is going through a recompete with their recompete contract, those systems that require OIT services. And we here have a list of those 7 categories of OIT services. They are EA, enterprise architecture for those EA services, for example, business process modeling, for example, security and privacy solutions, assistance with acquiring your ATO, strategy and risk management tools, data services, shared services. If you need to go before the technical review board for consultations or any governance reviews that Kevin just mentioned earlier, and of course CERT, the CMS intake review team for access to OIT services. Next slide. So how do you start a project? You have an IT project and you want to get it through the door, you want to get some OIT services. It's a 4-step process. The first thing is the business owner will need to submit an IT request form. Once we receive the intake request form, the CERT team will review and evaluate that request for any possible IT solutions. Step 3 is the business architecture review, the BAR. Those are not required, but if it is assessed by the CERT that a BAR is necessary for maybe discussing with the business their needs or leveraging other existing architecture, then a BAR will be scheduled with enterprise architecture, which is a staff within OIT, and that meeting will be scheduled through EA. And then step 4 is the IT component discussions or initiate IT services. That follows CERT. So if there's a determination that OIT services then are needed following CERT, that engagement with OIT will begin following CERT. Next slide. So the first thing we would do, the business owner will draft and submit the intake form. This gives you a little glimpse of what that intake form looks like. Section 1 is that background information. It asks for the project name, for the project manager or project lead information, who's the ISSO. In section 2, it goes a little bit more deeper about the need of the project, general information about the project. Certain questions are, what IT services do you think you may need? Are you considering using a client service, cloud service provider? What contracts do you have in place to support your project? Those are the various types of questions that are on the form. And again, it is gathering that information so that we can have an effective conversation in this CERT meeting. Next slide. So this slide here, this circle diagram, shows you who participates in our CERT meetings. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the CERT is that initial touch point for OIT services. We meet, CERT is a biweekly meeting. We meet on Thursdays. It's a 90-minute meeting from 10 to 11:30. We assess anywhere from 4 to 6, sometimes even 8 projects per meeting. And we have a discussion and we come up with options and next steps and recommendations for the business. What you see in this circle here are those subject matter experts or components within OIT that are represented on CERT as part of the CERT intake review team. The first circle you'll see to your right where it says CERT DEMP, that's the Division of IT Investment Management and Policy. We serve as that coordination focal point for business owners, support, and interaction. We are that CERT support team that schedules, prepares the agenda. We reach out to the business owner to coordinate and invite the business owner to the meetings. We issue out the CERT meeting minutes and CERT recommendation letters that includes those next steps and recommendations that have been determined out of the CERT meeting. And then you have OIT DIOG, which is to the bottom right. That's the Division of Investment Oversight and Governance, also within OIT. If it is determined that OIT services is needed, then a single point of contact will be assigned out of this division to work with the business owner. To the left of that is enterprise architecture for any EA services, technical guidance in that area. A representative out of EA is present in the meetings as well. They work with the business owner to complete any security documentation, leading to the authority to operate an ATO. Up to the top to the left is the security and privacy. You guys are very familiar with some of the people that work in that division. The representation there is Jason King for security and Mike Pago for privacy. And they help to assess any security and privacy needs at the time of the meeting. And then we have representation from the Technical Review Board. They provide that technical guidance and any compliance for CMS technical reference architecture. They also review the project for enterprise perspective, and they look to avoid any duplications of systems, and they identify any risk. And then we have the IT Governance Board. So they are made aware of any new IT projects that we have going on. The ITARP and the BATS are made aware of those projects. So the CERT team, we sit in a meeting of 20 to 30 people or more, either in the room or on the phone. We have a discussion about the intake form, the collection of information. The key stakeholders are the business owner, the SMEs that I just mentioned earlier. The business owner can invite their technical contractors to make the meetings more effective so that the business owner can achieve their goals. So we sit in that room, have the discussions, come up with next steps and recommendations. So it is a strategic discussion. Next slide. Step 4 is a business architecture review. It's an interview between EA, others within OIT, and the business owner. And they use that time to leverage existing architecture. Most times we determine if a bar is needed if the business owner is not sure of their project need or they're not sure of a IT solution. So EA will schedule that meeting with the business owner and have that conversation. Out of that conversation, EA will determine findings and recommendations, and they draft a business architecture report, review report, and that report is provided at the next scheduled CERT meeting. It is presented before CERT. We have conversations about that report and those findings, and then the business owner will receive that recommendation letter with all the details of what they will need to do next. And then step 4 is initiate the IT services. Again, that's when the business component will then begin to engage with OIT for those services that have been identified. Perhaps it's infrastructure services, perhaps it's hosting services, but those conversations will begin. And that will be those real services that need to be put in place. One of the things that CERT has the capacity of doing is providing that quick turnaround, and we're able to make some decisions right there in the meeting where things can get done right away. Next slide. This is the CERT high-level process flow, and what you see here are those activities and stages from the beginning of the life cycle, and that initial phase begins with the CERT review. So you have the CERT review, you have your CERT meeting. Each project that comes through CERT is assigned a unique life cycle ID. Recommendation letters and next steps are issued. The next stage is the bar assessment. I just covered that earlier. If one is needed, a bar assessment is conducted with enterprise architect. We have the next stage is the acquisition strategy assessment. If it is determined that that investment is considered a major IT investment that meets the dollar threshold of $10 million or more, then staff within our division of IT, Investment Management and Policy, will reach out to the business owner to schedule a kickoff meeting to begin the acquisition strategy process. And then we have the technical review consult. The business owner will approach the TRB for a consultation and then continue through the expedite the life cycle phase. If there are any issues that come up that may arise, or the business, we need additional guidance from the governance boards, then that is presented to ITARB and BATS for additional discussions and decision-making by ITARB and BATS. And I hope that you understood that information was very helpful for you in understanding CERT and how we go about doing our business. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at it_governance@cms.hhs.gov. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Melissa Coyne to talk more about Agile Transformation.
Hi, I'm Melissa Cohen. So now that Kevin mentioned the word Agile, I know you all have heard the term, but how many of you actually know what Agile is? By a show of hands. Okay, cool. So those of you that don't know what Agile is, I guess for our adapting to an Agile methodology, it's really a culture mindset shift in the way work gets done. Excuse me. It's also iterative development, kind of breaking work down into small bits of work or smaller chunks of work, and kind of seeing things earlier. So why are we looking at going to an enterprise Agile approach? Really, there's many benefits to it, but for our purposes, it's really visibility and transparency. So with using an Agile methodology, you can see working code earlier, and more often. So with that said, by seeing things earlier, there should be a reduced risk to the agency. It also allows for more flexibility when you change requirements, because if you see something's not working properly earlier, you can go ahead and make the changes more on the fly or pivot as necessary. In addition to those, there's also some OMB mandates that are coming down, which are really kind of telling us this is the way to move from a software development standpoint. So because of this initiative, we've onboarded a contract. The contractor that we've onboarded is Octo Consulting. The contract vehicle is called Enterprise Agile Planning and Training. And we're 3/4 of the way through the contract at this point, I would say it's been going pretty well. We've established some best practices, both within CMS best practices of kind of Agile teams that have been successful, that's been working, as well as some other government agencies and some private sector, I would say, healthcare companies, like a Blue Cross Blue Shield equivalent. We've looked at a strategic framework. We've done an environmental scan of CMS to kind of see where we are and really map out where we need to go over the next 2-ish years. Developed a tactical action plan of how we're going to get there. And the piece that we're really focusing on now is kind of governance redesign. So we've held a governance redesign workshop. We're in the process of starting a pilot with some Agile teams within CMS of different ways of looking at governance and different ways of conducting governance within the CMS environment. Another piece of all of this is training development, training curriculums, and then delivering those trainings. Sorry, it's not working. There we go. Excuse me. So with all of this being done, we've stood up a Center for Enterprise Agility. It's known as the CEA, which manages basically all of the Agile resources that have been developed. We've developed some principles and practices for the agency. We're working on some governance redesign, kind of team-level engagement, as well as technical review board engagement models. Those are still in early pilot draft form. But we've stood up a SharePoint site. Thank you to Jamie and Surya. Jamie sitting over there. They did an excellent job developing this SharePoint site to house all of the resources and serve as a knowledge repository. If anyone wants to see that SharePoint site, it's available under the CMS Share homepage. All the way to the right side, it says Governance, and under that, there's one button that's called Agile. So please go take a look at it. Feel free to reach out to me if there's anything that needs to change or anything else you guys want to see. Excuse me. In addition, so through our environmental scan, we've identified kind of 5 major areas which stand in the way of CMS's adoption to an Agile methodology. I don't think any of them would be too much of a surprise to you guys, but they're the CMS culture, how our contracts are being done within OAGM. They are working on kind of different ways of doing contracting, as well as training. We need to get the agency trained on kind of Agile principles and practices and how to really stand it up within a government world, as well as a management paradigm, and last but not least, governance. So kind of the XLC, although there are flexibilities in it, a lot of people have mentioned kind of the challenges of running a true Agile methodology within the confines of the expedited life cycle as it stands today. So over the next 2 years, we're really trying to break down each of those 5 impediments and attack them from different areas with kind of different initiatives that we've established. So here's kind of the 7 product areas or epics within our body of work that we're looking at breaking down. The first 3 products, the Agile Center of Excellence, the Agile Governance, and Agile Training, are the primary focus for this contract vehicle that ends in September. So we're down to the last quarter of that. The contract is being run using an Agile methodology, so things have pivoted based off of the needs that we've identified as we've gone along, and kind of we're eating our own dog food, I'd say, and trying it, because that's, I think, the best way to learn. So I think the beauty of it is really learning and being able to change as you go along. As far as next steps, we have immediate next steps. We have an Agile immersion training scheduled for June. It's June 13th and 14th. If any of you are interested, feel free to reach out to me, Melissa Cohen. We also have an executive leadership training scheduled for July, as well as some technical governance redesign pilot program. We're working with CCSQ's EQRS program and are in the draft stages of a different TRB engagement model and developing kind of artifacts for that, as well as a team engagement model and artifacts for that. So how does the EQRS program interact at their team level with them, as well as their contract support staff, and how does that shift happen as far as their engagement with the technical review board and kind of a historical waterfall stage gate process. In addition to all of those exercises, we're currently working on a contract vehicle for continuation of these efforts moving forward. So thank you guys. I guess we'll wait till the end for questions.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thanks.
But I'll
Melissa.
pass it over to George Linares, the CTO.
So good morning. I'm George Linares, CMS's Chief Technology Officer, and I have to stand up. I can think better on my feet. So let me ask, who hasn't heard of the Technical Review Board? Who has not? Oh, there's one person. That's good, actually. I mean, that's what I expect. I mean, that's what I hope, anyway. So the TRB has been around since about 2005. I have had the privilege to be part of the TRB in one capacity or another, and the TRB has conducted close to 3,000 reviews since then. So there's a lot of knowledge. I've seen the agency transform from the very beginnings of being very technology specific, dictating the specific platforms, to now being on the other spectrum of being more technology agnostic. So what is the TRB? Yes, it is the CMS Technical Review Board. It is the agency's body that has all this technology knowledge, and it's a service. And that's the one aspect. It is part of the governance, but it's a service to you and your teams, your contractors. There is a lot of information. Technology is evolving. We know that. Every day something changes. I was just talking with the lady in the hall about Hadoop, and now that seems to be like a year ago type news. There's a new architecture out there for databases. And that's how technology involves, the cloud. So all of these technologies cannot be brought into the federal government as they are, or as they exist in private industry. We need to really look at that technology, working with security, and try to see what does that really mean to CMS. Because we do have federal laws and regulations, and at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is protect the data, right? So how do we do that? So we look at the technology, we have a number of engineers or part of the membership, and try to make a context of that technology. So for you, it's one place to go to. If nothing else, what I want you to walk away with about the TRB is that it's a service where you can come to. Yes, we support the XLC, but the other thing is there is consultations. And those are conversations between the project teams and the TRB about anything technology related, and sometimes other things as well. It's there for you. The other goal of the TRB is making sure that there is interoperability across the agency, whether you're in the cloud, whether you're in traditional hosting, independent of that. There has to be integration because all of the programs at the end of the day communicate and need data from each other. So what is the scope? There's a lot of information here. There's some things that are in scope for the TRB and some things that are not. So this is just to give you context and how it fits in relation to the XLC as has been covered before. But there's other things in here that the TRB does is consultations, review technologies, which I just covered. And that's what I want to make sure that you understand how this body can help you as you move forward, especially at the very beginning of your efforts. You know, when you're trying to sort of get an idea on what's available, what's not available. CMS is moving very progressive, in my opinion. We're a very progressive agency when it comes to technology. So there's a lot of things happening across the components, and sometimes the message doesn't get across. So this is one way to learn about it. The Technical Reference Architecture, or the TRA, that is the document that sort of encompasses and keeps all the information about technical guidance in a formal way. And it's out there. And at the end of the day is we want to be sure that there is interoperability across the agency. That's key, and we protect our data. We want to make it as difficult as possible for anyone to come and get that far into our architecture. There is 5 volumes. This is a new update that's happened in the last year or so. Before, we used to have about 20 plus documents, but they were very hard to keep track of the information. So now we've converted them into 5 volumes, and hopefully the information is more easily accessible from your perspective, and this can be shared with your contractors. Okay, contractors are allowed to have this information as long as they have a contract with CMS. And who is a better person to know that? The GTL. So if you know you have a contract and they need this information, please. Everything is in SharePoint, and I get to there, so you can create a package, get it, and deliver it. So from a security perspective, one thing that we did also new is now all the official findings from the TRB get loaded into CFAX. So from an ISSO perspective, you have one place to go to. All of the findings are there. They all need to be addressed. Hopefully, most of them will be moderate. We don't foresee any high findings from a TRB perspective, but there's been some instances where we do see some technology risks, and we want to make sure to alert the business owners and teams as well. The other thing that we do from the TRB, which is not here, is we do create reports. We got weekly reports that go to the teams, and those are all accessible in SharePoint. But we also create executive level reports that go to all the box tops across the agency. Why? Because we want transparency. We want them to know. We don't want them to be surprised that this effort happened in their component and may have a high risk. We want to make sure that everyone knows what's going on within the agency. Contacts, resources, you have the package, but the first one is the way to schedule a consult. You just send an email to that resource box, and they'll respond rather quickly. The resource, CTO Cornice and SharePoint, everything is there. If you go there, you'll get this, and there's a lot of information beyond the TRB. Every review that the TRB has had, letters and presentations, so if you want to go a historical view, you're brand new to a component, you want to see what happened before, it's all there. it's available for you to access. We want to make sure that you know what's happening, what other components are doing, but the TRB is always available for you in case you need it for an actual consultation. And that's all I had, I believe. That's it. So. Yeah.
Kim, you going to tell us what happens next?
Does anyone have any questions? Anyone? Anyone on the line?
There's one right here.
Oh, can I borrow your
You have
mic?
questions, sure.
Oh, yeah, a couple of questions, okay.
Thank you.
Tony.
Tony Jones, Delmark Technologies. Ms. Cohen, you mentioned earlier that you were speaking of some training sessions that were available. If I can go back to your page of June.
June 13th and 14th. They're,
I should have dog-eared the page. Hold
they're
on a
currently available only to federal employees.
Just federal employees,
Yes,
not contractors.
CMS, yeah.
That's what I need to know about that. Okay. And Ms. Bellamy, in your presentation, you spoke of business. I think you said business owners. I'm assuming those were the service providers, like your major healthcare providers and folks like that. Am I correct in that understanding?
The business owners are those within CMS. They are CMS staff components within CMS.
Okay.
So various divisions, program offices within CMS.
Okay.
And that's why I indicated that the business owners can also invite their technical contractors. Those sometimes will be members outside of CMS, but they are welcome to attend the meetings to provide some effective conversations.
Okay. And I guess my last question is, in that diagram you shared, there appeared to be a point in time when, after the review board was, the CERT review board was done with their evaluation of a particular new requirement or whatever we want to call it at this point in time, it goes somewhere. And I'm assuming it reaches a point where it's being made available for vendors, contractors within CMS to begin to see coming through a pipeline or something like that. Is that correct in my understanding?
And are we speaking of this diagram here?
No, the circular diagram.
The circular diagram,
The
okay.
circular diagram you had there. That one.
Okay.
At the end of that process,
Yes.
something comes out of that in the way of a product or a need for a product.
Yes, what comes out of that CERT meeting is a letter that we provide to the business owner who is a CMS staff person.
Okay.
And it has next steps. It may say that you will engage with EA for business process modeling services.
Okay.
Or it may say that you need to have some conversations with security and privacy. If you're trying to get an ATO, there are certain things that you will need to do. Or perhaps you're just getting started and we'll say you need to get with the technical review board to have that initial consultation before you can do anything else, and then you may have to circle back to CERT. So it's a letter that's issued to the business owner with actions for them to do internally within CMS, but also they may have to work with their technical contractor who's doing the work for them.
Okay.
Does that answer your
Just
question?
That's helpful.
If I could add just one thing, it's really not a contracting or acquisition focused outcome.
That's what I
So
need to
it doesn't initiate some sort of contracting action. It's really just guidance and some direction to the business, and they could be in different levels of progress towards the end product. And so sometimes they will have conversations, and the business maybe already has a development contractor on board. Maybe they're in progress in development. Maybe they're close to implementation. But many times, but we like to get to them and have conversations before they go out and have a contract, because that's when we can have the most positive influence on the outcome.
Okay. And lastly, as an aside, I may be dating myself here, but we used to call Agile prototyping years ago. But thank you.
So we're over time. We're on break now until 10:15, and then the next session starts. So thanks to the panel. If we can give them a hand for that. It was very informative. Thanks, guys. And the next session starts at 10:15.
All right, thanks, Bill.
You can find me on the CMO's website. And I'll have any Yes. Thank you.
I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about Agile work. We supported
Didn't bring in
like that, so I just wanted to give you our information because it's important to
Kevin Casey.
listening, you know, the right people
Yes, it
about
is.
where we're doing
Yes.
Agile.
Hello?
Tom?
Yeah, we got it now. You're going to have the majority of them. Good morning and welcome to our presentation today. So my name is Tom Shankweiler. I'm the Cyber Director for the CKIC.
Hey, how's everyone? My name is Hector Cruz, SOC Chief.
And I'm Lee Moore, the team lead, CMS SOC.
So I heard there were supposed to be 90 people registered. I see most of them have cut out. They must have heard that you can hear me now? Okay. I think there's supposed to be 90 people here. I think we're down to 20 or so because they must have heard I was speaking. So, we'll make the best of a bad situation. So anyway, we want to really kind of talk to you about the CKIC and the SOC. Most people have kind of heard from our CKIC and heard from our SOC via email and via voice, and they really don't know much of what's behind the curtain. And so we wanted to kind of explore that a little bit with you here today. So if you've been listening to anything from Tom Price, he's been talking about reimagining, right? And a couple of years ago, we had a change in our administration. We have a new CISO, a new deputy CISO that came in, and they looked at our programs and decided that they were going to change and revamp our programs to meet today's needs. And so they went through and they said, we're not going to be doing compliance for compliance sake anymore. We're not just looking at sending numbers up to HHS. We're actually going to do real cybersecurity. And I was really excited because the only area that was doing that in earnest from an enterprise perspective here at CMS was Marketplace. And so they took a lot of the lessons that we had, or a lot of the things we had put in place and a lot of the lessons we had learned, and they built upon that platform. Emory also brought a lot of information over from DHS, and he knew where the government was going. Bo brought in some amazing information from ICE and some of the new things that they were doing down there. And he had just finished a master's program that looked at how you can re-envision a SOC for the future. And so he was able to kind of take that vision along with Emory and then a few different folks that we were able to bring together as key individuals and really reshape. We just kind of blew up, as Emory likes to, or Bo likes to say, we just kind of blew up that program and we've brought it back together. And so you're going to see how we've restructured that. Hector's going to take us through that organization a little bit. And I think it's on the screen behind me now. You'll see that we have a SOC. You can't get away from that. We have a marketplace SOC that really looks at the marketplace. It was the #1 priority for the agency and for the past administration. And it continues to be a major player as far as programs. So we still have a SOC that is dedicated to that activity. We secondly have another SOC, which is our CMS SOC. And you're going to see that there's been growth around that and a major increase in our visibility and where we're going, which has also created a number of efficiencies. So across the enterprise for CMS, we're able to do more with less and do a better job at doing it. So what I'm going to do is kind of go through left to right just for a second. You'll see that not only do we have the SOCs, which is on your right side of your screen there, we also have on the left side what we call our CKIC. And the CKIC is really kind of your level 2 or tier 2 kind of activities. So a problem that we found in SOCs, and this happens across many of the traditional SOCs, is once something's detected, that becomes the focus, and it's the only focus. And what happens is the agents or the analysts, they stop looking at the glass and they focus totally on the incident. And you could see in our reports when we had the old style is there would be activity and then the activity would completely drop off and we would work that one incident to just work it and work it and work it, work it. And it was difficult even to end it, And so with this new approach, what happens is if somebody sees something and we get it into a ticket, it gets passed up to our incident management team, IMT, and the SOC goes back to putting eyes on glass and is looking for the next thing. So our level of what we're actually detecting is going up, 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 which is a complete difference than what we had the going down in just the isolated focus on one specific event that was occurring. So it's a complete shift in our culture. Okay, I want you to kind of understand that. And we'll be talking a little bit more about those as we talk about each group here in a minute. But what happens is it goes to the IMT next. The incident management team becomes the focal point for communication. They're supposed to get on the bridge calls, get everybody together, and ensure that we don't just have a linear approach where it goes from this group to this group to this group. It really becomes a meshed network of people that come together and surround that incident, and they go do their part. So what that's done is it's driven us from weeks of detection to remediation down to hours, sometimes days. It's truly transformational. And it's that kind of stuff that Tom Price has been talking about that we're ahead of the game on in SOC and in CKIC. And it's really, really exciting. So if you hear Tom Price talking about that stuff, those kinds of thoughts really empower our ability to change. And I want you to take part of that away from our briefing today, that this is kind of that living example of what we can do. So back to IMT. So IMT is reaching out across to the data centers. They're doing the communications. They're letting everybody know what's going on. But they also have consistency in communication up to the executives. So no longer are we in the position where, hey, we have something that hit. Oh my God, what is it? Oh my God, the hair's on fire. And we go into major fire mode and everybody needs to know it. We are also out of the picture of where we would create a ticket, and while somebody was working on it, that ticket made its way up to HHS, made its way to the HHS administrator, then the HHS administrator called the CISO and said, what's happening on your network? And they go, I don't know. That happened more times than I can count, but it doesn't happen under Emory's watch anymore. We now know what's going on. We tell other people what's going on. And we're actually in a position now where we're letting HHS know that they have activity on their network. And we, HHS, because they like that model, have started to change the way they're doing business. The CCERT model is starting to die out, and they're bringing up what they call the HKIC model, which is going to be more public-facing, but there also is an internal component. And they're modeling a little bit after what CMS is doing and what some of the things in industry is happening. And so what's happening now is not only are we contributing back to what's happening at HHS, now FDA is doing that, CDC, and all the other components and organizations. So there's new collaboration happening, and it's not happening at the director-to-director level or executive-to-executive level. It's happening between analysts. And that means we're getting closer to the speed of where we can actually make change faster. We can detect, we can respond, we can react, we can quarantine, and we can share that information. So if they're trying to enter through CMS but get to NIH, we can tell you exactly what's happening. We can give you the indicator of compromise, and we can provide it not just to HHS, but we can get it real time over to NIH, and they can quickly, within minutes, determine if they have stuff on their network. So things are really changing on the backside, and that's not something that ISSOs normally see. All they see is, hey, we have a CA coming up. We want to start really changing the way that the ISSOs are engaging on their cyber activities. And so we have more training coming up. We have more opportunities to bring folks into the CKIC and see what's happening on the ground with their system specifically. So this next year, as we go into the FY 2018, we're going to be moving more and more towards that posture that you can be in the decisions around risk-based governance versus just compliance governance. And so there is a huge transformation going on, and you're going to see it heavily linked to the transformational kinds of activities that HHS has been talking about. We have also been working very closely with our NOC side, so with Leidos and with the IUSG folks, with Marco's team, right? There's a lot more integration happening there, and we now know what's happening on the network as far as changes, and they know what's happening on the security side. And there's like, they could go on for hours about all of the really cool things that are happening that are improving our core plumbing in our network. But it doesn't stop there. It is starting to rise up now into the application layer and into where your businesses are connected. You're starting to get calls from our CKIC and into the ISSOs and through our risk advisors saying, you know, we're starting to see some things and it has an impact on your business. We want you to be involved in the conversation. And so you're starting to see that level of maturity happening. And because of that, when the OIG just came in a couple of weeks ago, they did a assessment with us about our maturity from last year to this year. And it's kind of like a 5-point scale. I won't get into the, you know, what all the names were, but we went from like a level 2 to a level 4 out of 5. So it's really, really being seen. across the board with HHS identifying and copying our processes, OIG recognizing that and understanding where we're going. And then finally, we've been issuing some new contracts that are allowing us to streamline the way we're able to detect and respond to events. So I'm going to leave kind of the big picture there for the moment. I'm going to turn it over to Hector. Hector's going to give you just a little bit of a dive into each of those areas that we've set up, so you have a little more appreciation for what they do, but he's going to go through it a little bit quicker. And then we're going to talk about WannaCry, and that was set up a little bit by Emery at the opening remarks. And we're going to do a little bit deeper dive on WannaCry because it's really interesting, and it just happened, and so it's fresh in some people's minds. And look at the speed at which this organization responded. It's truly amazing, and Hector's going to tease out some of those points. And then at the end, we're going to open it up for questions. I know that you all have questions just about CKIC and SOC, but I also know, I guess you've already hit me up, I know you're going to have questions about ARS-3 and CKIC integration. So we're prepared to take some time today to begin to answer those questions and give you an indication of where we're going, but I'm not going to have definitive answers for you today. But I can tell you where we're going. So with that, Hector, I'm going to turn it over to you for the next slide. Lee?
Hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to stand. All right. First slide, going over the ISP strategy, mission, vision, and the 4 strategies. So goal number 1, rapid response to cyber attacks. 2, agile and innovative security architecture. And 3, full operational visibility of sensitive assets and data. And last, risk-based governance and engagement practices. Next few slides, I'll go into a little deeper of our groups and what we do. So this slide covers the SOC, Security Operations Center, 24/7, 365. So to dig a layer deeper, these are the services that we provide. So when I first started, typical stuff, you got your 24/7 monitoring, considered networks, NSM, network security monitoring, incident response analysis, spam services, and kind of try to look at the team a little deeper to see what else we can add as far as value. One thing that I noticed is our maturity as far as creating our own content, not solely being dependent on what the vendors provide, but kind of build that maturity level where we can do our own threat research and hunting and develop content that detects this stuff. All right? So that's a big key, preparedness, right? Preparation. Preparation for us is content development, and the detection phase is the content that we develop for this research that we conduct. And information sharing. We are big on information sharing, whether if it's the information that we get from CTI or the data and information that we acquire from the incidents that we report on. Okay. Next slide. These are some of the monitored environments. Biggest one for us is BDC, Baltimore Data Center, and that's part of Lido's team. And big user population, and basically, I'll go over some highlights or some key points as to what we observe and what we report. And some of the numbers probably scare you a little bit. To the next one. So as far as attacks, right? Threat vectors, right? There's 2 primary ones that we observe. There's email-based attacks, and there's web-based attacks. For email, a lot of you guys have submitted spam, of course. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the spam button or have used the spam button. Anybody use the spam button in this room? Good. All right. How do you guys feel about the spam button? Awesome, right? Awesome. All right. So if I'll tell you that the increase in spam submissions have gone up 400%, would you believe me? It's gone up 400%. So timely remediation, disrupt campaign objectives, right? So you guys submitting emails to us and us responding to those emails, doing our investigation, our response, we stop those objectives in a timely manner, right? Because we don't want to wait, right? The next attack, web-based, covers 30% of our reported incidents. So again, this goes back to the user, doing casual surfing. I don't know if you guys do casual surfing here, but be careful, right? Because you know, you doing a little bit of research, looking up something that you're kind of piques your curiosity, can lead you to, you know, being redirected, and you're not even knowing, because a lot of this stuff happens in the background, right? You got your client-side redirects, which is, you know, mostly Java-based. You're not going to see that that activity in the background, right? So while you're looking at an awesome page in the background, you know, something's being dropped on your machine, and you're not going to know unless you have some technical capabilities, right? And most of the redirects that we see as far as web lead to EKs. And again, EKs is more of the broadest scope. So good reason why we see them. Next one. So this is going over this C-kick. Not really going to go deep into this one. Just going to go over the groups. Let's go to the next one. C-kick's mission, which I'll go over in the next couple slides. So IMT. So incident management team. Again, there's 24/7, mostly on call, right? So here's how it works. Incident management will gather all the appropriate parties, right? When an incident or a bridge needs to, be spun up. Their responsibility is to get the appropriate groups involved within a timely manner, take notes, bring our incident response team, which is primarily the SOC, and then we can coordinate with our C-kick, the rest of the C-kick. And the next few slides will cover the rest of the teams that are part of this big puzzle, right? Security engineering. So security engineering, basically, they pretty much take care of our security tools, make sure that they're mature, fully developed, and give us exactly what we need. So the big key here is maturity and keeping those tools, oiled, finally running, no issues, and they do a good job of that. And another one is that they do is researching, seeing what other tools are out there that they can bring into our tool set. All right, next one, CDM. CDM. So are you guys familiar with vulnerability assessments? Okay. This is basically what the team does. I know it has a fancy schmancy name, continuous diagnostic mitigation, but at the core, it's just vulnerability assessments. So they run vulnerability assessments, they draw up a report, provide it to IMT. IMT circulates the reports to the appropriate parties for response and action. Next one. CTI, this is the fun team. So CTI, Cyber Threat Intelligence, it's an awesome team, and the actionable intelligence that they gather for us is amazing. So part of their duties, as far as day in, day out, go over open internet, research threats. They're actually working on going into the darknet and doing some research there, but I'm not going to go into detail as far as that. But we have a direct relationship with CTI as far as when the SOC creates a ticket, needs a little bit more context or information regarding, the indicators or the particular threat, they'll provide that context to us, and that'll expand our capabilities as far as, searching and responding to additional threats. And again, key piece for them as well is information sharing. I'm gonna throw that word around a lot, information sharing, right? So FMET, so you guys are familiar with malware analysis, dead box forensics. I'm really gonna go into too deep of detail with that, but basically that's what this team does. And again, as far as the SOC is concerned, we get a box that's popped, we'll get them engaged, and they'll cover, the forensic piece as far as the asset, right? Host level. Penetration testing. Now these guys, these are the rock and rollers, right? So these guys, in the past month or so, have found, vulnerabilities with Jira, Confluence, some of the tools that you guys probably use in this room. And they just keep going. I mean, there's no stopping them. Another partnership that we have with them, and we work directly, is the Purple Team. Now, the Purple Team is your Red Team, Blue Team. You guys familiar with Red Team, Blue Team?
Can you just give a quick quick
Yeah, yeah.
snaps on what those are?
So this is a bi-weekly meeting, not necessarily bi-weekly because we do it,
What's
daily.
red and blue?
So red team is the pen testers, blue team is us catching, the bad guy, which is the pen tester, right? A lot of, improvements have been, as far as our relationship and improvements, as far as what we have for the SOC, maturity-wise, as far as skill set, the pen testers have a lot to do with that. They're a little bit more advanced as far as what they can do because, again, they're the bad guys, and you give them the keys, they'll come in and do whatever they need to do. But what I want as far as this group and what we've done is, okay, catching them is one thing, right? How do we detect them, right? We need to have something in place as far as content and alert to continuously track these kind of behaviors and activities. Don't leave it there. Make an alert. Number two is visibility. Do we have the appropriate visibility to even, get an alert or a detection, or at least get a glimpse of what they're doing? So that's another thing. And visibility, we're expanding on. So that's another thing that we've, it's one of our big initiatives moving forward, expanding our visibility. So I like throwing a little couple jokes here and there, but have you guys got one of these before? No? Or you just don't want to say it? No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, this is the note that you get, the pop-up that you get for WannaCry. You guys familiar with WannaCry? And how it affected, on a global scale, right? So our response to WannaCry, as far as, covering the vulnerability itself, it was good to see as far as from my vantage point and how the integration between the SOCs and CKIC, it just developed right in front of me. It was amazing. So Friday, it kicked off, I think it was the 18th. It kicked off. We got notification, again, through CTI, because CTI is, looking at the open web. They found it. They reported it to us. What are we going to do about this? So they provided some indicators to the SOC. SOC ran some searches, didn't see anything, created some alerts, because, again, we can do the retro, but what happens after, right? Detection. So we created some alerts. Next thing was to get, CDM involved, pen testers involved, so they can scan for these vulnerabilities. Scanning continued through the weekend and throughout the week. So that was continuous. And notifications were sent out through IMT, through all the data centers to say, hey, look, we have this vulnerability. We have to take care of this and take care of it ASAP. Okay? So basically, these are covering some of the points. Next one. I'm not going to go over the details as far as what ransom did. I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with it. And this is the response. Again, team. That's what I want to make it really clear. CKIC and SOC, both SOCs, we're a team, right? And it was good to see us kind of use this model and use this model effectively because it works. And the maturity level as far as our groups has increased and leaps and bounds from when I started. So just want to make that clear that the CKIC model is effective. So these are some of the data centers that we communicated with. So I'm going to stop it there and open it up for questions.
So I want to comment quickly on the WannaCry incident. So Hector did a great job explaining kind of what CKIC is, what the different functions are, but there's a little bit larger story than what happened here locally. So as you saw on that last slide, 0 was on the screen, and that number has an actual significance. And I'm going to give you the backstory for just a minute. And what happened is this thing kicked off, of course, for us, it's always the classic time, Friday at 2 o'clock, like we're ready to go into a weekend, and this pops up, which doesn't leave a lot of time for us to respond and think about the magnitude of what we have to do here at Friday at 2 o'clock. we determined, based upon the intel, that a patch needed to be applied. And so we have to contact every data center, every contractor. We have to start that whole communication wheel turning at Friday at 2. So it's Friday around 4 by the time things are moving. Later that evening, over in HHS world, they're communicating on WannaCry, and they are the primary group across the federal government that is in charge, because this is hitting healthcare in UK. So they're the lead. And they start talking at the federal CIO kind of level, saying, hey, we got a problem here, and we need to be working on it. And so it brings in US CERT, and some new things start happening. And the new administrator says, I'm going to activate my emergency preparedness system. The secretary of HHS, I'm going to activate my emergency preparedness system. Now that's typically like FEMA kind of things, like, we just got hurricane season just kicked off today, right, June 1st. But typically it's used just for that. This is the first time that we're aware of that it's been used in the history for a cyber event. So the people in the room surrounding him are the typical people that are not cyber. There's no cyber people in the room. So we're moving into late Friday, and the people that are advising the secretary say, oh, look, patch it or turn it off. So that's the directive. Patch it, isolate it, or turn it off. So the word comes down, and our cyber folks start moving into HHS. HHS CISO really gets into the game, and they can no longer talk about how hard that is to do. Think about it, 0 basically by nightfall or within 24 hours, he finally gives us 24 hours. Everything has to be patched or off, turned off, segmented off somehow. This is the entire HHS, all agencies, NIH, CDC, CMS, turn it off or patch it. So are we patched? What's our levels? Can we tell today? Remember, this is Friday, 6 o'clock now, and we're trying to round up everybody that supports CMS. By Saturday afternoon, not only were the agencies reporting in their numbers, we were coming in very close to 0. That is amazing that the communication structure was in place, that the people rallied around that, and we got to 0. Now, as we continued to search, we learned about a few more machines here and there that came on, but at that moment, everything we knew about was at 0. And every time something popped up, it was the whack-a-mole, let's get them back down. And we had to continuously report through the weekend, through Monday. Then it was the new lessons learned. What are we doing? How are we responding? And everybody's contributing to this. And then it's at a national level being discussed with OPM, White House, right? What's happening? What's our ability to respond to these kinds of things? So when Emery's up at the very beginning talking about if you don't know your patching, you will soon, guess what? You're going to know your patching cycles. If originally they thought it was coming through email, right? It turns out it was not, but all of a sudden our ability to do having a workforce that's trained in spam detection is amazingly important. And we have that line of defense now operating not just today, but has been operating. And we found there's some difficulty with the patches. When we started looking at the patches itself, there were some that just couldn't be implemented for business reasons, as Emery talked about. There was some that it broke, like it didn't work when I tried to patch. So now a contractor says, oh, I got 48 hours per my contract. Well, the secretary says, turn it off. If you can't meet your 48 hours, that's your maximum time to patch, is what our message was. Yeah, you have that long to patch, but the secretary says now. So what is the new norm? You got to be thinking in those terms now, that we need to be able to do speed. So if you are a business owner on the federal side, you should be evaluating your capabilities. You should be asking these kinds of questions. So one of the things that Emery's working on is kind of a slick sheet that talks about how does a business owner engage in conversations with their contractors to be asking the right kinds of questions. So he's going to empower, basically, through knowledge and good information of what we've been learning, he's going to empower those folks to begin to ask the right questions, right? And so that's the shift that we're starting to see. And we're inviting more people in to be a part of those conversations. So I'm going to leave it kind of at that because I think I've hit a lot of the highlights. And I want to open it up for questions. It's now 10:50, so we have 10 minutes for questions. If we don't get any, I have a couple other areas we can dive into. But honestly, the best way that we can have this forum end for this session is to get into a little bit of dialogue. And Bo is here, okay? So Bo can grab a microphone. He can answer questions as well. It's not limited. We have Lee, who does some amazing work with us, and he does our cyber briefings once a week. So there are people in-house to talk about things. So Conrad, we've been working with Conrad quite a bit here on the high glass side, and so I can't wait to hear what he's got to either say or ask.
All right, my name is Conrad Bovell. I'm with OFM, supporting High Glass. And I'd like to echo some of the sentiments that they've conveyed today regarding the effort and the successes that the CKIC has accomplished thus far. It's quite a operation. I would encourage business owners to actually engage the CKIC and actually take a tour. I actually had my cybersecurity team actually go over to the CKIC office, and we got to meet the operators, and they gave us a briefing on exactly what they did. Because my effort with my team is to try to promote more integration with CKIC, which again helps with the whole information sharing and the like. So, and especially with the message being able to respond at the pace of the threat, which is one of those things that it's a new paradigm. You can't just wait. You must act now to have the effect that you're actually that's going to be required to protect the people's data. With that, I wanted to find out what are the sort of, even though I've begun this process, but for the rest of the folks in the room, how would a system owner go about getting sort of tailored analysis that you all see of their information? When I say that, I mean, there's a lot of information with respect to network activity and those kinds of things that you all are looking at activity on the wire. How would someone go about getting sort of tailored information about the security posture of their system?
So I think Bo, you're going to grab that one? Or do you want me to do it?
I can start it. I appreciate that, Conrad. I really do. And to the earlier point, I had a chance to speak at C-Scout last year, and my tagline was cybersecurity is a team sport, right? We're all in this together, and nobody can do it all. So it kind of highlights some of the principles that we use to build the CKIC. So a couple things to your second point. The first one is the pen testing team that Hector talked about. Getting them to attack your network and to figure out which doors and windows aren't secure. The second piece of that, and we do that type of engagement. That's the sole purpose of the pen test team is to, we would rather them find it than the bad guys find it. So they crawl through our environment constantly, checking every system that they can get access to make sure it's secure. The second point is the cyber threat intel team. They're the focal point for emerging threats and for really staying ahead of what's going on out there. So with WannaCry, they recognized it. They developed fingerprints, if you will, of that kind of activity, and they shared that quickly with the stakeholders that we have just to see if we were seeing any of that similar activity. And again, back to the team sport concept, we want that information to go as far and as wide as we can. One of the topics that we want to talk about at C-Scout this year is that intelligence cycle. Our country's been doing intel for centuries. We know how to do intel. Our Intel team is made up of Intel analysts. It's not IT people, it's Intel people. They think differently than IT people. It adds a whole different perspective to the way we approach our work. So we want to present at C-Scout and talk about that intelligence cycle, and then we want to solicit the Intel requirements from our stakeholders and add that to the intel requirements we currently have. So, you know, there's more to come on that, but that's the direction that we want to take the activity to really get to your point about that customized view of your network from a threat perspective and from a weakness perspective. Those are the two elements that, you know, comprise risk management, right? Risk is threats plus vulnerability. It's not one or the other, it's both. So we got to fill those two topics.
Can I add something? Of course. So last time you visited us, I kind of brought up, you know, having sysadmin or system owners constantly auditing, looking for, you know, anomalies and stuff that's questionable and stuff like that. That's definitely a key piece that I've seen throughout my career that is missing. You know, I've seen DBAs that constantly look through their logs, you know, to, you know, question certain activities and then present it to the staff for further analysis. That's the kind of partnership we need, again, because it's a team sport, right, that we need from the system owners and the system owners and the sysadmins and engineers as well. Because I'll give you a good scenario. We're trying to do some research. Actually, we did some research on PowerShell, right? We received some good intelligence, some good information, but we noticed that there's certain commands that are run hidden, right? Do we really want commands being run hidden? No, we don't, right? So guess what we did? We blocked that kind of activity because we don't want to see that. We want to make sure that we have a solid list of commands or scripts that are ran in our environment, and we'll question anything outside of that scope. So again, baseline. And the only way we can get to that point, yeah, we baseline from a SOC perspective, but we also need the system owners, sysadmins, engineers to baseline their behaviors on their systems as well. Yeah.
Right.
So we got about 3 minutes left. We'll take one more question, and then I want to just comment on ARS-3 real quick.
My question gets back, first, Antonio Jones, Delmark Technologies. Gets back to the question of the WannaCry situation that you guys were successful in averting. Given the typical response time that business owners require of their vendors, and given the necessity to get on top of these matters in as rapid a fashion as you can, do you envision, from your perspective, requirement maybe changing a little bit from a response time frame for vendors who are in the business of responding to these anomalies? And then lastly, if there are slides for this presentation available electronically, love to have it.
Okay, we'll work on that through Kim Hemby. But
to the first question, what we saw with the WannaCry was the business owners or the partners, the contract partners that we depend on to do so much work at CMS, they recognize that this is a risk not only for CMS, but for that business, that contract, that partner as well. Nobody wants to be explaining why they're the ones that got impacted because of a timing thing. And so everyone really jumped on board to do their part to get us where we needed to get to, and it was, it all worked out like Tom highlighted. So there may be some tightening of the requirements. I don't think that's the primary source of the activity, though. I think most folks, they want to do the right thing. They want to protect themselves and the business, and that's what we saw with WannaCry. So. Emory indicated earlier about the patching and really having a close eye on that because it is really important. But so we may see some tightening. But
so I think what that kind of influences is the policy-driven kind of analysis. Like if we say you have to, instead of 45 days, you now need to do it in 30, or now you need to do it in 20. You look at it almost like a speed limit. Well, now I can go to 45. Now I can do it. It's really kind of saying, if I'm risk-based and I'm threat-based, what should I be doing? And how does that become a differentiator, I'll say, as a contractor, between you coming with me as a contractor and versus somebody else. You know, it takes them 45 days to patch. We've embraced CMS's risk posture. We do it in 14 days. You know, whatever the numbers are, right, is that now becomes part of your competitive speak. And you're not waiting on policy to, you know, to drive all of that. It's what's right, right? And what's around the risk and threat. So we are right at the time. I'm going to just end with this on ARS 3 and CDM. The new requirements are in there, and we have people asking, so how do we integrate in regards to CDM and the requirements to integrate to CKIC? So here's my 60-second answer. More is coming probably in the first week or two of July after we get through the holidays. We're going to have a deep dive 1-hour session on this with much more detail, of course. Where we're heading is that ARS 3 basically makes the requirement that you all do what you've been doing for years, which is you collect it locally. You don't have to send all of your data to us. You don't have to pipe all of that network traffic to us. That is not even feasible. And I hear people saying that like, oh my God, we're gonna have to open up all these pipes and who's gonna pay for that? That's not happening, folks. It's very similar to what you were doing before. You had to do vulnerability management, you had to do configuration management, you had to know what hardware you had to know what software you have. Nothing changes. All we're going to ask for is the ability to have visibility to that same information in an automated manner rather than you having to put it in CFAX once a year. That's the change. So how we get there looks a little bit different from data center to data center. So we're going to put out some methodologies, some structures for doing that, and then we're going to work with you. We're not putting major, major structures in. We're not, CDM initiative was kind of like, you're going to put this in, it's going to replace or rip out all of your stuff. We're not doing that. We're taking advantage of everything that you have built that works and function, is contracted for, and we're interested in the data. We're interested in the results, and we're interested in holding you as a peer accountable for that information. Right? Do you really know what's on your hardware, what hardware you have on your network? If it's something that pops up you've never seen before, how are you going to correct it? Do you know what software you have? So you can baseline it, so we can block things that are not supposed to be there. Are we doing proper rule management? Are we doing proper configuration management? Those are the kind of things that we want to move towards. And it's really about, if we know we have a threat, we can talk to you about that threat, and you can do the internal analysis that you need to do. Right, so that's where we're heading. So all fears, please calm down. Right, more details in July, and we'll get there. Rob, there's no way I'm going to call on you. All right, have a good rest of your sessions.
Nice one.
Locked up on you? I'm going to shut that down. You get some updates on it. I'm going to just put it in sleep mode.
Oh, no, you can shut it down.
I'm going to try to.
put this on for the 11. He's in here. Okay, we're okay right now. Let me take this for you.
Okay, I'll try up here. I just.
Do you want to try? Do you want a chair or anything behind you or a table?
Oh, yeah, a table. If there's one handy, that'd be great. Okay.
Can I do that?
You can.
Hi. Welcome to this session. Just for your information, the slides for this presentation are already conveniently placed in your blue bags. So if you don't have one, just let us know. Let one of the event guides know. And we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to introduce. You want to go ahead?
No, introduce me.
Mr. Jim Whelan will be here to present and talk about security and privacy, some of the integration points and what it means in our healthcare sector. So please welcome Jim.
Thank you, thank you. Is there a problem with the AV over there? I heard. You guys okay? Okay, good. So I have a long history with CMS. Growing up in Minneapolis, I was a respiratory therapist or respiratory therapy tech. That's how I paid for college and law school. And I came to Baltimore and I joined one of the firms that was kind of a pioneer in healthcare. Back then it was called Ober-Kaler. And one of the reasons Ober-Kaler became, if I say in all modesty, a force in the healthcare environment is we were close to CMS. And we worked with the National Health Lawyers Association to do the Medicare and Medicaid Institute, which still enjoys the wisdom and participation of a number of you or your colleagues because you don't have to travel. That's a reality of today's world. But the thing that was funny, and the thing I always remember is I got a copy of the Part B Carriers Manual, and I had to go through the Freedom of Information Act to get it. But I got the darn thing, and there were like maybe, and this was when healthcare law was growing as a specialty, but I really loved it. And it wasn't just, real estate transactions for charitable organizations. It was, it got to the money. And where it gets to the money, of course, the lawyers need to feed at that trough and hopefully help. But there were probably only a few people outside of CMS that had the carrier's manual. It was only in paper. But it was a treasured document because it was like the keys to the kingdom and the rules of the road. And there isn't a lawyer on this good earth of ours that doesn't love to seem to be the possessor of secret knowledge. So I did a lot of work with Part B reimbursement, and back before it was kind of a zero-sum game with getting coverage and payment and helping people. And I was always impressed with the people I worked with, names you probably don't recall, Bernie Potashnik, people like that had a mission. They had a mission to do good. And I think that mission continues. But so today we've got a little bit of a different spin, and I've thought about it a lot, and I'm kind of tickled with it. It's to talk about how data privacy and cybersecurity relate to healthcare. I think the important things I'm going to be talking about are covered entities and business associates, and I will leave it to Matthew Olson, who's going to wrap up, but to tie a bow on it. But in certain aspects of your obligations and your roles here at CMS, you're under HIPAA. I won't spoil Matthew's list, but you can't hide. There's a few. But I think there's a broader interest in what I'm going to talk about, and I hope that's what I can bring to bear to you, because covered entity or not, business associate or not, the whole culture is changing in terms of the privacy of medical information, and it affects you and your job, it affects you as an individual, and it affects the whole institutional array, your doctors, your insurance company, the people you work with. They're all subject to what I think is a massive change in the culture of the United States. And let me give you an analogy for that. When I was growing up, people would come visit my folks' house in Minneapolis, and a lot of them smoked. And so they'd come in, and I remember, because my folks smoked, not much, but they'd light up a cigarette. And then they'd look around and say, well, where's the ashtray? Well, can you imagine walking into somebody's house these days, unless you knew them well or smelled the cigar smoke, and light up a cigarette and ask, where's the ashtray? And what caused that, in my mind, are two things. One is the government entered that arena of our lives. The government started to have warnings on cigarette packages, and all of a sudden that fostered the second half of it, and that is public awareness. And I used to be a smoker. I don't say good, bad about it, but when you have those two powerful forces, the government and individual awareness, it may happen slowly, but massive changes happen in the everyday fabric of our environment. And it's certainly that way in my mind with smoking. But the same thing has gone on with healthcare. And I'm going to spend a little bit of the beginning of my discussion talking about how we got where we are with healthcare, because I think it affects you at CMS, but I also think it's part of your life, and I think it's important to share that knowledge. And I was given the keynote assignment, so I get to do that. So healthcare is different from other data. It's different just because it is so personal. We have a lot of concerns and a lot of laws about credit identity theft, and that can be devastating. But so can medical identity theft. It's not just the notion that strangers, and we'll be talking about that in a few minutes, should have knowledge of your medical conditions. I think that the awareness of that has been fostered by some of the developments that I'm going to talk about. But theft of healthcare data can be used against you. The worst thing, and there's instances where this has happened, is medical identity theft. Someone steals your insurance card. They go into an ER. They register with some disease that you don't have. Let's say it's emphysema, going back to my respiratory therapy days. Well, if you have emphysema, you don't get oxygen because that will shut down your breathing. Emphysema is driven by what they call hypoxic drive, by the CO2 in your blood. What matters is someone has put into your now electronic healthcare record a diagnosis of emphysema. So if you get admitted to the hospital horizontal and there's nobody around, your family isn't there yet, and you're turning blue, the doctor is probably going to get your medical records because of health information exchanges, modern technology, and some of the other things we're going to talk about. And if the doctor gives you oxygen, you're going to stop breathing. Things like that have actually happened, and it's a terrible tragedy. So let's talk about the special steps and measures that apply to healthcare data, because it is treated as something that is in its own realm. The players are covered entities, and more these days, and this is something I'm going to talk about at length at Business Associates, third parties that aren't covered entities, but that work for covered entities. So to be a covered entity under HIPAA, you have to provide health care. It's a very broad definition. But the second thing is you have to bill electronically for certain standard back office transactions to another covered entity. The simplest example is you have to submit electronic claims data to an insurance carrier. If you do that, you're a covered entity, and then you've been under HIPAA since the legislation was enacted in 1996. And so the other suite of actors are business associates, and they have grown in the importance of their roles enormously as the system has evolved. But business associates are third parties that are not covered entities, but they perform a function or activity for covered entities that entails the creation, use, or access, or now the maintenance of protected health information. That's your personal information that can be identified to you. So that's where as I said, I think we got a similar revolution going on. I think it's even more pervasive than tobacco, but I thought tobacco was a good lead-in. And it's important because not just medical identity theft, but the world has changed. The world has changed now. I think what we're really aware of is bad actors have woken up to the availability of health information and its use or its misuse. Ransomware is a big concern, and it was a big concern before WannaCry. But again, when you couple that with it's like everyone woke up and discovered the Internet of Things. There have been smart beds and stuff like that for years, but now all of a sudden, people realize, you know, my Fitbit health tracker is talking to some other device and it's not secure. My blood glucose monitor is reporting results autonomously that will lead to an algorithmically based adjustment of my insulin dose. So what a great opportunity for an entrepreneurial bad actor, because the security is in a to-be-developed state in much of the Internet of Things. The data is extremely valuable, and it's not hard to see that you could get a ransomware attack based on, I'm going to shut down your insulin pump, personally, or if you're the manufacturer. So, I mean, that's kind of where we are, but let's talk about how we got there. So, the world changed in 1996 when Congress enacted HIPAA. There was a little gleam in Congress's eye. What they wanted to do was they wanted to have uniformity of the various back office transactions that were increasingly being done electronically, so that if a provider had 21 different payers that the provider billed, the provider did not have to use 21 different sets of terminology, transport protocols, content protocols, and things like that. So the core of HIPAA was the transaction standards. But there were a couple sentences left in the legislation because Congress decided that they wanted to establish a national floor for the privacy of healthcare information. And that was set up so that if Congress didn't act, it fell to the Secretary to act within, I think it was maybe 6 months. So Congress didn't act, and the Secretary promulgated the HIPAA privacy regulations. They drew heavily on the Privacy Act of 1974, but with a lot of changes. And what they did is, and again, think of this in terms of its impact on you and your life and on people that you encounter in the course of doing your job responsibilities or otherwise. It gave patients rights to their own data. And again, if you think back, some of you are old enough to think that far back, some of you aren't. But patient records used to be sort of the doctor's secret. As a matter of fact, there were some complaints and litigation when HIPAA came into play that people demanded their medical records. And I remember one that was reported that the doctor charted something like, well, I saw the old goat again and he's still bitching about his corns. And, you know, that's yours now. You get access to it now. And it has changed medical charting as much as the electronic medical system has changed medical charting. So all of a sudden, you as an individual, you as a patient, you as a consumer affected by something that CMS does, it's your right to access your own data. Even back then, I remember seeing a flow chart when Senator Clinton was working to reform the healthcare organization, and it looked like an aerial view of the LA freeways, but it showed the flow of information from the individual through the healthcare system. And it was incredible even then how much private information was going to people that weren't caregivers. But they were people who were working for caregivers and providing services for caregivers. And that role has become much more important as the data availability and the specific needs of the healthcare system have evolved to the point where they are now. The other thing that was, the Secretary did not feel back then that there was any statutory authority to regulate anyone other than a covered entity, which was a payer, a healthcare provider, who submitted claims electronically, or a clearinghouse. So, but they did know that there were these business associates that weren't covered that were getting protected health information. So they sort of put the responsibility on the covered entity to have a business associate agreement that established the uses and limited the uses to the minimum necessary, and otherwise at least embodied this whole third-party network in the regulations and in the concept of HIPAA. And you know, there was some, I think it was a 2014 survey that said 51% of the data breaches, which is one of the important things we're going to talk about, result from third parties, not from covered entities. It's amazing. So business associates were brought in, and finally it sanctioned the notion that you could take and aggregate personal health information or de-identify it and take it out of the scope of the regulation. That's very, very important because it established a uniform legal way to turn individual data into usable data for data analytics, which more and more drives our healthcare system in terms of financial responsibility and care management, and a couple of the things we'll get to when we get to where we are now. And so de-identification, you basically remove 18 direct and indirect identifiers and anything else that can be used to identify the individual. And data aggregation, you're permitted to put together as a business associate, to put together the information of multiple covered entities that you represent and come up with things that I would analogize to registry data. Here's how you compare to your peers that I represent. Great things. They're tools that have grown in importance and improved our healthcare system enormously. But so we finally had a national uniform floor of individual rights, but what we had was individual empowerment. And not just individuals, but advocates for patient privacy now had the right to view their own records. They had their right to amend the records through a process. You couldn't just go in and say, I don't like this. You had to justify it, and if it was not correct, you could still submit your little statement that would be part of your medical records, and receive an accounting of non-routine disclosures. And non-routine basically means any disclosure of your personal information, your PHI, that isn't for treatment, payment, or healthcare operations. So suddenly people had tools, and when people had tools, they start to use them. The other part of this three-part suite of HIPAA was the HIPAA security rule. It was published in 2003 and it was effective in 2005 with some exceptions, but it was specific to healthcare. It was divided into addressable standards and mandatory standards, and what's always interested me is encryption was then and remains now an addressable standard, not a required standard. I.e., you don't have to encrypt protected health information to satisfy the HIPAA security rule. If you don't, you have to have compensating controls, which would be different for data in motion than it is for data in rest, but it's not mandatory, except, to just use a legal term, you're an idiot if you don't. You're an idiot if you don't, because encryption takes you out, if it's done properly, and the standards are not hardly insurmountable. They're based on 3 NIST publications, and most any common commercially available encryption system will pass them, let alone if you set a FIPS standard for encryption or one of the DoD standards, which are more frequently used. But you don't have to do it, but if you do, then if it's lost, it's on a laptop that's encrypted, it's not a breach. Same thing for the state laws that require protection of personal information, which is Social Security number, increasingly and contumaciously the keys to the kingdom. There was an effort under HIPAA to come up with a national identification number that crumbled under the weight of the impossibility and the proposals for 36-bit cipher. I have enough things to lose. I suppose I'd have a card like my Social Security card, but It's too bad. We may have something, but not yet. So, encryption is also important for state laws. And all of these are laws that require you to report a breach. And so we're going to be talking about the specifics of breach reporting in a little bit. The thing about the security rule is it was written in I think 2003. I think that I sent my first email about then. I think I did searches on something called Dogpile. I think I should have invested in Google and Apple, but I didn't. I was out in Palo Alto at the time. My wife wanted me to. I hear about that periodically. I've always admitted Dominique is smarter than I am, but you know, I guess it's a guy thing. I didn't listen to her. But a lot's changed since then, but the security rule hasn't. And I don't think it would hurt the feelings of the people that implemented or wrote it to say it's lagged some. Look at encryption. I mean, it's still enforceable. If you don't encrypt, then you have to explain what you did that was just as good as, and it has to be adequate. But there's so much resources available from the department. And the Office of Civil Rights has expressed a great deal of, I think, proper approval for the NIST cybersecurity framework. What is it, 833, I think. It's in the process of revision. And they published a crosswalk. It's very good. It's not for the technically faint of heart, but it crosswalks the HIPAA security rule to the NIST standards. And I think for larger, it's expensive, time consuming in any event. You have to have somebody that is technologically erudite to even read it, let alone implement it. But if you go through it, and I think you may, given the however much data you have that's protected, you've got a good system. And again, the government has shown you how to use it and how to update it. So I think rather than updating the security rule, what they have done is moved laterally into urging the hospital healthcare provider sector to move to this standard. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So the next key event, and this one was, the consequences of this are enormous, in my view, was Congress passed the breach notification rule a couple years later. And that was a rule that required people that were covered entities, primarily custodians of protected health information, to report to individuals and to the government any breach of the privacy or security of that protected health information. So now, it was not an ugly little secret, and again, I'm not disparaging anybody. Now, again, people had a right to know. And so big breaches make big headlines. Little breaches make junk mail. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've probably gotten, every couple months I get a notice from some caregiver that, by the way, we're reporting that we had this little breach and here's what you can do and things like that. But again, it's another aspect of changing the way we relate to our most personal information. So individuals now then had a right to know about the breach of the privacy. The definition was somewhat subjective. It was the breach likely to pose a material risk of financial, reputational, or other harm to the individual. That's important because there are lawyers in this world. And lawyers look at things like that and help their clients interpret them and help their clients interpret whether there was a reputational risk or some other risk that was material. And so that got figured out. And so Congress changed it as part of the HITECH Act. They said that now we're going to switch to an objective standard. It's very similar. There's 4 factors you have to consider, but has the information been compromised? And if it has, you have to give notice. And so, again, I think this led to a change in people's awareness of not only how much of their information was out there, but how often it was getting misplaced. And so that led to further changes, one of which was business associates were brought into the direct jurisdiction of HIPAA. It was necessary to do that, and it's never been challenged. So the business associate includes now any third party who's not a member of the workforce who has custody of, access to, creates, or importantly, maintains protected health information on behalf of a covered entity. Maintains was important because there are some of the major systems that claim they only maintained the PHI, they didn't access it or use it, and therefore they were trying to say we're not a HIPAA business associate. Providers of personal health records and things like that were working as a part of a covered entity. And so that took effect. So now we've got a much tighter definition of a breach. We've got a regulatory scheme where there's really parallel reporting. It's seldom you'll have a breach of PHI that doesn't include a social security number. It's still used as identification, or something else that fits within the ever-expanding ambit of the state laws, because they're starting to include medical information. In California, it includes online account information. So there's a whole move on the regulatory side to answer the concerns of individuals about having awareness of when their information is taken so that they can take appropriate protective steps. So now, virtually all states have laws requiring notice to individuals if there's a breach of personal information. They're usually given in tandem with a breach notice of PHI, but as I said, they include medical information, online accounts, and other information, depending on the state. It's the state where the person lives that governs the laws. So if you're a provider that has a breach and you get people from 15 states, you got 15 different notices or sets of rules to comply with. There is a price to be paid in terms of cost of compliance, but compliance is not optional. Again, encryption exempts you from these reporting requirements in, I believe, every state. So there's no private right of action under HIPAA, but you can still get sued under HIPAA by state attorney generals enforcing and protecting the rights of their state. You can get sued by individuals that claim simple breach of privacy. There's a range of common law remedies that are available. But the real issue is the cost of breach notification and the reputational harm it'll do to a business, because it's serious. Public companies have breaches, their stock prices reflect it. The publicity is adverse. The breaches are public, but everyone knows about them because they're big news, and everyone may affect their business and their purchasing decisions. So the Federal Trade Commission has gotten into the enforcement area too. The Federal Trade Commission has very broad authority under Section 5 of the FTC Act to take enforcement action where there's unfair or deceptive trade practices. The courts have consistently held that the Federal Trade Commission doesn't have to publish regulations that provide guidance for when loss of data is deemed to implicate the Section 5 of the FTC Act be an unfair or deceptive trade practice. Gives them enormous power. If they hear of a breach and they think there's something wrong with it, they basically propose a compromise order, and you have a settlement agreement in effect, and you have the option of trying to fight it without regulations to back up your fight, or agreeing to it. And I don't know that that's necessarily bad, but that's the way it is. What the Federal Trade Commission is focused on is online companies that either take more personal information than they really need, or more PHI than they really need. Because how many medical accounts can you have? If you search the internet, how many tests can you take to see if you've got this problem or that problem, or general fitness tests? how much opportunity do you have to give personal information to some faceless company, and they're not necessarily bad companies, but they're going to store it, and what are they going to do with it? Well, unless you read the terms and conditions, which even lawyers don't read, you don't know what they're going to do with it, but you should. So taking more than they really need, and also promising more security than they really provide. There were a number of these online medical services, tests, accounts, give you services based on your giving them information that said the privacy of your information is our number one concern. We take absolutely every step to guarantee that there will be no improper action, no improper disclosure of your personal information. Well, boom, if there's a breach, that's the other thing that historically the Federal Trade Commission is going to be looking at to see if there has been a violation of the law. A couple other co-conspirators in this little story of the expanding role of health information in the warp and woof of our society is the Federal Meaningful Use Program. Congress decided it wanted to encourage the adoption of electronic medical records. They were around for a long time. People didn't always like them because they weren't always uniform, but what the Meaningful Use Program did was provide very significant financial incentives for healthcare providers in certain categories, hospitals, physicians being prime, to adopt a certified electronic health information software package that had been certified by the Office of the National Coordinator, and paid the money for meaningfully using it. And that went through various stages with various challenges, and it's quite a complicated system, but it is designed to have a robust electronic medical record system and one that's interoperable, that is able to exchange data with other electronic medical record systems. So again, we have this development, more and more mechanisms to flow personal data through the system. So if you want to look at the gloomy side or the risk side, now there's more and more centralized data in electronic forms, but on the good side, it really allowed the sharing of information among providers for good purposes. It carried with it risks, but where we're at now is the government, and starting with accountable care organizations, is really focused on measuring and improving health at the population basis. There's an old line in a great old movie, one of the airplane movies with Leslie Nielsen, who played a doctor, and there was some food poisoning or something on the plane, and I remember him telling one distraught spouse, I'm afraid we're going to have to put him in the hospital as soon as we land. And the spouse said, "Oh, but doctor, what is it?" And he said, "Well, it's a big building with a lot of sick people in it, but that's not important now." Well, that's true. Hospitals used to profit by buying the latest piece of medical equipment, and it worked medical miracles. People in my family have been beneficiaries of those medical miracles, but then they charge more money and make more money. Well, that is no longer the way it works. Now, generally speaking, the financial incentives at the federal level and increasingly at the private payer level are trending towards keeping people out of the hospital, keeping them healthy. And so to do that, you need to have information. And that's what all of this has been about. All of this has been about what's going on with our health information in our country and where it's heading. And I think it's heading someplace good. Maybe it's a generational thing, and I'm maybe out of my generation, but my son, who's 27, doesn't particularly concerned about who knows. Of course, he doesn't have any health conditions, but he's not worried so much about that, and he's comfortable relying on the protections that are afforded by others. We had a discussion last night because I've got McAfee on my laptop and it's slowing it down, according to Alec. And I said, well, gee, but he said, well, look, it's slowing it down. I said, well, you know, I put it on there because I buy stuff from Amazon and give my credit card numbers. And he says, Amazon takes care of that. You don't need to worry about the security. He may be a little naive, but you know, the people, our children and our grandchildren, are less sensitive to privacy. They know more about their rights, but it's become more acceptable that personal information, health information circulates among a vast array of people. So now incentives, like under the Affordable Care Act, accountable care organizations, are rewarded for improving the health of a zip code population. So it's imperative that information be shared across this population among all the providers. And that's what all these things, analytics, de-identification, all the things we've talked about before, have enabled. So the buzzwords are care management, assisting individuals to more effectively manage their health care. And, you know, my personal reaction is I don't really want anybody telling me how to take care of myself. But sometimes they really are there to help. And granted, maybe the agenda is to have you get an X-ray instead of an MRI or something like that. But maybe there's a reason for that. And maybe we have to do that to keep healthcare remotely affordable. I can't express an opinion on that, but it is. And so care management depends on really almost in real time having the financially responsible people know events that affect someone that they're financially responsible for. And some of these are people that they don't have any relationship with. For example, Hospital A may participate in an ACO. They get a list of zip codes. They contact the individuals opt in or not. You don't have to participate. But then their incentive payments depend on how well those individuals do. There's a huge development going on here in Maryland with the renewal of the Medicare waiver, which I have heard some knowledgeable people characterize as basically being kind of a statewide ACO. And so for this to work, the responsible party has to get an encounter notification service, message, EMS, and it's going to have medical information, and it's going to be transmitted over the internet, and it's going to be encrypted, and I hope, and then they need to reach out to that person because they get a notice that they've been seen in an emergency room that's not theirs, and an MRI has been ordered. Well, you know, from the individual point of view, okay, but from the system's point of view and the financial incentives towards increasing, lifting up the healthcare that's provided to an entire population, it's very important that they know that. So we're at a stage now where patients are very aware of their privacy rights. Breaches is a big, big, important feature of just almost our day-to-day life. When don't you read about a breach and the problems it can cause? Patients are aware, most of them, of how much health information circulates to individuals and entities they don't know. So they want to be protected. One of the goals of all of these systems is to grant patients more granular control so that a patient can say, I don't want my urologist to see the medication prescription list that I get from my psychiatrist. It's right now, in most circumstances, it's more bulk data. Either you share it or you opt out. But the people that are active in this area are working very hard and are dedicated to enabling this sort of granular control. So providers, as we've said, they've got to have on-time information. There's enormous amounts of information out there, and to avoid breaches and just to do a good job, they have to have cybersecurity. So business associates, as I said, are more and more key players under the federal standards and under the state personal information standards. If there's a breach at a business associate level, it's reported up to the covered entity. So the covered entity is ultimately responsible unless it agrees with the business associate otherwise. So that's where we get into the other half of this, cybersecurity programs. And I'm not going to go through telling you what ransomware is and malware and things like that. I think you know that. The thing I think you should note is how many of these risks are born into reality by some employee clicking the wrong email and opening the wrong attachment. If there's one focal point, it's probably that. So what does HIPAA require? Well, the HIPAA requirement is that you have a risk assessment, and that is a thorough review of the flow of protected health information through every aspect of your environment, and finding the risks, and then managing those risks, mitigating those risks. And the risk could be the risk could be, gosh, we have an internet-facing data that is not encrypted or is not protected by a firewall. That's happened. There have been penalties applied. Oops, somebody forgot. There are risks of loss. There are risks in the disposal of data. There was a big hoo-ha about 4 or 5 years ago when it dawned on people that some advanced copiers that were being sold, recycled, had personal information stored on them. I think most security officers and most manufacturers know that and have taken care of it. But the whole point of a risk assessment is you got to really cover the turf thoroughly. You got to have a plan, and you don't have to do everything at once. You can budget for it, but if you've got major flaws, you have to take care of it. And if you're ever investigated, as you may be under, if you have a HIPAA breach, then you first thing they'll ask for is your risk assessment. And it's amazing to me how many covered entities don't have a risk assessment. It doesn't have to be a single unified document, but they have to show that we did this. And what amazes me also is how many business associates don't have risk assessments. And some of them are new to the world of protected health information. Some of them aren't, but it's become very important. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on, and we're going to talk about managing business associate relationships, because I think that's a very fundamental component of the job of the healthcare industry. So again, a business associate works for a covered entity. There has to be a business associate agreement, and for years it was just, you slap a standard business associate agreement on it, and it went through what was required in the regulations, and everybody was happy. It got a little more testy when breach reporting came up, because you had to negotiate things like how soon do you report the breach, who's responsible for the costs of the breach, and things like that. But if you step back a little bit, I think when you're dealing with business associates, and I think Matthew and his crew deal with business associates sometimes, your role is not perhaps as broad as the general role of public and private hospitals, but the first question, what the mindset you have to adopt is, these are important relationships. They've got data that we're ultimately responsible for. So how much do they have? What are they doing with it? I mean, I get in these phone conversations with vendors of technology on behalf of health systems I represent, and it's amazing. You have to follow the PHI. But depending on who you start talking to, it's amazing when they say, oh yeah, that's right. By the way, all this data is stored by a third-party data center, and they're offshore. Well, thanks for that bit of news. I mean, that's not apparent. You have to be thoughtful and aggressive in considering where your information is. You have to start thinking of business associates in terms of tiers of responsibility. How much PHI do they have? Where is it? Is it on your servers and they access it remotely? Or is it on their servers and they have it, you better know where? you really have to start thinking in terms of doing due diligence. Is the business associate new to healthcare? Do they have a history that you can find out? They have to file reports of breaches, for example, with the Office of Civil Rights. Do they have third-party certification? Are they a data center that's got a AICPA SOC 2 level 2, which means some third party that's trained has come in and assessed their compliance with 5 areas of service organization controls and issues a report. If they do, you need to look at it. And so then you adopt a strategy that, that includes audit rights, includes follow-up with the business associate, and you may even have a separate information security agreement. And the thing to be aware of there is mission expansion. You start off all inspired, just like New Year's Day on getting to the club, and 3 years later, the business associate has been at so much help that they have 4 times the PHI spread over 5 different parts of their environment, and so you have to recognize that risk, and you have to recognize that responsibility. The other actor in the play is cyber insurance. That's fairly new. It used to be cyber insurance was covered under some general policies of errors and omissions or general liability policies, but that was before breaches started coming to the fore and before the underwriters realized, well, we didn't have any information to rate that risk. So now it's typically issued as a separate policy of insurance, and there's first-party coverage for losses and expenses incurred by the insured, and there's third-party coverage for losses that are imposed on the insured. And you need an expert to walk you through those, because one of the faults that you often see is there may be a policy that has limits of $5 million, but they've got a lot of sublimits, and they've got a sublimit of $50,000 for breach notification. And if you've got a major breach, you can blow through $50,000 in the first couple days. And so that's the environment that I think of. I think when you're dealing with these relationships, the first thing you look at is a contract, and you get indemnification, but that's really not worth anything other than the financial ability and the willingness of the other party to actually write you a check without being sued for it. Next level is cyber insurance. If you're a major organization with a lot of PHI, it may simply not be possible to insure enough to cover the cost of a catastrophic breach. So I think what you have to do at that level is start thinking about what are the probabilities and balancing cost versus covering a likely breach, and that's a challenge. And the final thing, again, to close and to get back to my point, is you have to do due diligence on those third parties that are out there handling your data. You have to really audit them. You have to know what they're doing, and especially audit them by level. Do they have a little, a lot, and what do they do with it? And that's your best and ultimate protection. So we got a couple minutes for questions. I hope this has been interesting to you. It's a bird's eye view of what I see going on in society with healthcare, and so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So if any questions, I'd love to respond.
Hello. I was wondering, let's say someone made a change to my medical record that was not accurate, and so then I changed it back, and then the fraudster continued to make changes. Do I have any rights? Like, how can you tell who's legitimate, who's not legitimate? Are there any standards?
Are the records in the custody of one provider or provider system?
Yeah, let's say that they are.
So let's say it's a hospital. So you have a right to access your medical records. Mm-hmm. And then you can look through them, and you can say, you can tell the provider, these 3 points are not accurate. Mm-hmm. And here's what's accurate. And then an uninvolved healthcare professional looks at that and says, yes, you're right, we will correct it. Or, no, you're wrong. So if they correct it, they don't white things out. You don't do that in a medical record, but they attach a corrective statement. If they say you're wrong and you don't agree that you're wrong, you have a right to have a statement attached to and made a part of your medical record.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. Anything else? Sir.
Hi. Really enjoyed your talk.
Good.
Was really interested in what you're talking about with encryption. Culturally, there's a big trade-off out there where if you go down the encryption path and spend the money that's necessary to cover data at rest and data in motion, do you find or have you found that you can get folks to accept the expense that is required to take that route and do it right? Or do they stop somewhere in the middle and say, hey, we've spent enough money?
I think in my experience with organizations, it's becoming much, much easier to get the budgetary allocation you need for encryption or for other measures. The savvy organizations, and I have the privilege of representing a couple of them, have the attitude that, well, you know, there's organizations that have had a breach and there's organizations that haven't had a breach yet. And I think there's general recognition at the so-called C-suite level of the importance of protecting protected health information or personal information because of the costs of responding, because of the reputational damage to the company, and also because it has become relatively easier and less expensive to encrypt than it was, say, 10 years ago. It used to be hardware encryption for data at rest was very cumbersome, expensive, slowed the system down, used up disk space, nobody liked it. That's evolved through software encryption, which is still available, or else for having an encryption server sitting in front of your data servers. Data in motion is relatively easy to encrypt, but it's not too popular with recipients. In other words, you know, if you're a Microsoft shop, there is an encryption built in, and it's easy to implicate. You just go down into protections and put encrypt. But what so far I've seen are the recipient gets a message that says, you've received an encrypted message from Jim Weiland, please click here to, then you have to go to another site, and then you establish a username and a passcode, and then if you're lucky, it'll open and you can encrypt. And so that slows the process down. It's not particularly user-friendly. And so at least among business to consumers, it's a little bit more of a challenge. From business to business, you know, if at the enterprise level, any big business will have TLS, transport layer security. It's common. You can set your systems up to automatically detect it and automatically encrypt and decrypt. But when you get down to the smaller organizations, you know, sometimes it's easier to fax. I mean, we run into situations where that's probably more secure. Interestingly, though, there is a provision in the fairly recent regulatory comments by the Secretary that you can send at an individual's request information over the public internet unencrypted as long as they specifically know that's what you're doing and instruct you to do it. So it's the incentives of avoiding breach reporting and protecting data are such that in my experience I see more and more high-level willingness to recognize that you really have to budget for this. It's not like even 5 years ago. It was tough to persuade anybody to spend any money on it, let alone 10 years ago. So, any other questions? Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. And I'm going to turn this over to your privacy officer.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Thank you. I want to thank Jim again for his presentation. So thank you. Thanks for today. It's my honor now to ask Matthew Olson to come to the stage for closing remarks to wrap out the day. We hope that this event has been helpful and informative. I'm getting a lot of feedback, and we appreciate that. So please, with your session guides, be sure to turn those in. We definitely want to use them and consider that input for future forums and training events. So we've asked Matthew to join us today. Matthew's been with the federal government for about 15 years. It's been over 15 years now. He worked for the Social Security Administration down the street and also at OMB, and most recently at the Department at Health and Human Services. I just realized you were named, when I was reading that, most recently in April. He's now the Chief Privacy Officer and Data Sharing Officer at HHS. I can say on a professional and personal note, since I've been at CMS, Matthew's also been a real partner here at the agency, supporting analysis of privacy risks and incident reviews, privacy impact assessments. I know things that are all very near and dear to us. And it's really, really great to have this type of partnership at the department. So it's really fitting that he wraps today out for us. So welcome and thank you.
Thanks, Ellen, and thanks, everyone. And for the record, I also used to deliver sheet metal, so it just shows, follow your dreams and you can make it big. I do want to thank Emory and the entire CMS team for having me up here today. It's really an honor. I will say that in my 3.5 years and now in my new position, CMS, if not the best, has been one of the best partners I've had from the departmental perspective. And that's saying a lot given, some of the events of the last couple of years. And my success is not possible without that partnership. So anyone, Ellen, Emory, Bo, if you've worked with me, you're part of the reason that I'm standing up here today. In terms of the position, it's something I'm really proud and humbled by. That position, Chief Privacy and Data Sharing Officer, is something that didn't exist a year ago. I will be honest, though, it's also something that it was an idea of mine, and the organization that I've built now was an idea of mine. It's been there for years. It took a catastrophe to make it happen. Everyone recognized the logic of it, but it took something bad happening, and sometimes that's just the reality. But the good news is we were ready to spring into action. And to Jim's point, he made a lot of great ones about C-suite type attention to these things. What's really inspiring to me is that once the decision was made to create this position and to do the things we've done with our organization that I'll get into a little bit, it survived the previous secretary under a different administration approving it, and it survived the new secretary because it got caught up in the transition, not only approving it, but finalizing it during a hiring freeze. I don't think that's necessarily a testament to me. It's a testament to the need for a position like that and some of the things that we're doing. So the question is, and there's been a lot of focus on cyber and privacy today. When you hear the term cyber, that's pretty easily identifiable. You have NIST controls, you do this, you get that. You put a firewall in place, you stopped it. I would argue that the privacy discussion is a lot more difficult. What is privacy? What is privacy today, and what is privacy going to be in the future? As I often like to say, unfortunately what some people think is you'll say the word privacy and it'll magically appear. If it was that easy, I would have the greatest job ever. I would also, so while it's more complicated, I would also argue that we can't default to there is no more privacy. Privacy is not dead. So in that sense, I want to kind of leap into a history lesson of sorts, because there's a perception nowadays that privacy is strictly the idea of protecting the data. Our security colleagues do a great job of that. It's not just about protecting, it's not just about preventing the flow of information. That's not what privacy is. If you go back to why the Privacy Act of 1974 was enacted, it wasn't to stop the government from collecting data. It wasn't to stop the government from sharing data. It's the fact that there was no transparency amongst ourselves as feds, and there was definitely no transparency to the public in terms of what we were doing and how we were making decisions with that information. From my perspective, what's happened nowadays and why there really is somewhat of a crisis in privacy is we've lost the ability, because of volume and because of IT systems, to have the transparency that we need for true privacy control. To truly have that transparency initially amongst ourselves, and then more importantly to the public in terms of what we're collecting, where it's going, and how we're protecting it. And we can't just sit there and then throw our hands in the air and give up. And it's, Emory made a great point in his opening remarks of it's not strictly also an IT solution to that. It's conceptual. How do we tackle this idea of creating transparency in this day and age? It's very daunting. But the fact is, that's the direction that we're going. If I just sit down and say, well, we'll do the best we can and we'll fill out a PIA the best we can on an individual system-by-system basis, that's great and we'll be able to check a box, but we're not actually enhancing anyone's rights and we're definitely not letting them know what we're actually doing. Because those new uses for information, that information sharing, part of my title, data sharing officer, that's going to happen whether I like it or not. That's going to happen whether I'm terrified about it or not. When you think about new, even healthcare realms such as genetic data, it's really hard, but you can go get a new social security number. You can't get a new genome. If you can, I'm not aware of the technology to do it. In the face of that, and in the face that to get good outcomes, whether it be healthcare, whether it be benefits, whatever your federal position is and whatever you do, that's got to happen for program efficiency so that we can actually do what we set out to do. If we put everything in a box and don't do anything with it, sure, we've secured it. There's privacy, sort of, but we might as well all get up and go home. And the scientists and the program offices that we work with all might as well go home as well. So because there's this lack of transparency, unfortunately, there's two default positions that occur right now. Folks like me freak out and say no. We stop the flow of information because we don't understand the flow of the information. And then what happens is the second default position is those of you who are program owners go off and do it anyways. And at that point, we've accomplished the mission, but we've also put the mission at great risk because we haven't thought of security, privacy, and other controls, records management controls for that matter. So what do we do about that? Because neither one is acceptable. It's not acceptable if that's my stance, and it's not acceptable if it's a program owner stance. My vision and my goal and what I've initially been doing for the first 3 years and now in this enhanced role and with some of the pieces we've put together at department level, I have a vision for how we can tackle this. And it's actually something that's right in front of us. It's just a matter of putting the right pieces together. In terms of base compliance activity in the federal government, whether it be HIPAA, Privacy Act, eGov, what have you, there are certain compliance activities that we have to do. The fact of the matter is we do those things in silos. We do those things with no clear swim lanes, and we don't actually look at how that compliance information relates to each other. If we did that, if we put record schedules in the same conversation as Paperwork Reduction Act submissions, in the same conversation as privacy impact assessments, if you focus your attention on the quality of the data you put into that, that's your data map. That's your data architecture. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a little bit. So what we've done at the department and under the new organization that I'm running, so Office of Privacy and Information Management. If I would have had my way, it would have just been the Office of Information Management, but privacy is what got us the funding, so I stuck with it. We've put together a lot of the eGov privacy requirements, PIAs and breach response. We've put together the departmental records management function. We've put together the departmental Paperwork Reduction Act function. If you don't know what Paperwork Reduction Act is, it's any time electronic paper, whatever, you collect information, the same information on more than 10 people, you got to tell OMB about it, and they make sure you're not being goofy about it, putting it very simply. We're also tackling other data issues such as controlled unclassified information, which is a huge challenge for the department and across government in terms of implementation. Our goal is to mature all those processes and align all those processes. So even if different ones of you in the audience might work on one of those things, from the departmental level, our goal is to make sure you're hearing one voice in this. And even if you only provide one part of that, how that plays into those other parts. That is how we start to get towards this transparency that I'm talking about. And that's how we start to find IT tactical solutions that will then further enable this. That's how we enhance security. I'm very passionate about this. For 3 years before this position, I really worked on that in the privacy realm. I'm really looking forward to tackling that with the records management, PRA, and other realms. I really think that's the future of this. If you want to be the special privacy person or the special RM person, that's great, and you'll do fine, and you'll collect your check and everything. But the future of this, I very firmly believe, is combining as many of these as possible because it's going to give us that full picture of where our data is going. We don't know that right now. We want to talk about facilitating data sharing. We can't do that because we don't know what data we have, and we don't know how it moves, and we don't know who we share it with. We have to change that. So along with this maturity, to give some specifics about the map that this can provide, looking at Paperwork Reduction Act submissions. We do it because we got to do it. We got to get to OMB before you can put the form out there. But what you're doing is you're creating a document that shows every data element that you're collecting and putting a lot of context and narrative around that. If you all of a sudden start putting all of those PRA submissions together, you know where data is first coming into any part of the department. You can create a data library. You can compare different data fields and make that more efficient. So when someone's going to do a form to collect new information, hey, by the way, it's already being collected over there. And by the way, here's how that data field is typically represented. Don't we want some uniformity? That's how you get to interoperability. In terms of privacy impact assessments, and I've talked about this and I'm much more familiar in this area, but we collect 43 data elements in our PIAs. That's fine. It doesn't tremendously mitigate risk at the system level. It engenders a good conversation about that system. But if we look at the 800 privacy impact assessments across the department, 43 distinct data elements for all of our systems, including our HVAs, that's your risk heat map. That tells you, again, accompanying the PRA submissions, where the data is flowing, because our PIAs ask about who you're sharing with and if you have agreements in place. And then you look at records management. I actually started as a records manager at the National Archives as an archivist. That's then your get out of jail free card, because if you have a federal record schedule, you can get rid of something. You can destroy it. Law says you can. You start putting these and other things together, and that's really going to get us to some really good benefits. Again, speaking to security, what I've seen happen, one of the reasons my position exists is we had a major incident in one of the optives last year. And what we found is afterwards, none of that compliance documentation was up to date or correct. So as a result, we couldn't respond effectively. We didn't know the picture. We didn't have the transparency, even in that one program and system. The thought of what we can accomplish and to enhance security in other programs, if we have that transparency, and when an incident does still happen, because I'm not going to stop that, I would if I could, you will have that instant, almost omniscient picture of what could have happened the instant you find out that the breach happened. I know that seems like an impossibility to some of you, but I really think it is achievable. It also, if we do this, and as we continue to mature it, it vastly improves our ability to responsibly share information. We can't just open the doors and share everything, but we also need to be responsible. And when you talk about the goal of being responsible in terms of the different risks, if something is low risk and we've identified that in terms of our data architecture, then great. Share it as much as you can. But we too often do it in the dark, or we do it in a silo, and even if successful in that one area, we haven't shared as much as we could. That's kind of ironic for a privacy official to say we should be sharing, but it's the way that we're going, and it needs to happen. We just need to find a way to more easily do it responsibly. And then the biggest thing, and what I think is a more accurate term than privacy, is this, again, theme of transparency. We're going to create transparency amongst our programs between the department and CMS, and there is great transparency right now. With all of our programs across the board, that has to happen. Because the real point of privacy is to then be transparent to the public. They need to know the decisions that we're making about them. They don't want to be surprised. We don't want them to see some version of they bought something on Amazon and all of a sudden every Facebook ad represents that to them. Or if we're going to do something like that, it's to get them a good health benefit, and we are absolutely transparent and they understand and have meaningful consent into what's going on there. We can get there. It's going to be very difficult, but I'm very optimistic we're on the right path on that. And I want to end by stating again that CMS has been a great partner in this. Anyone, again, who's ever worked with me in the audience right now, I really, really appreciate your help on that. And I look forward to the continued partnership. So thank you very much. Thanks again for having me up today. And if anyone does have a question, I'll be glad to take them.
And with that said, what are you doing? I mean, you know that you're sharing this data with these people. What are you all doing about securing their environment, or is it up to them to secure their environment? Because if we or you are providing data to them, you would want to make sure that what they're doing in their environment is securing their data. So how does CMS play a part in that?
So number one, CMS should play a part in that, and the whole department should play a part in that. I'll start again by telling a very brief story. I did a detail at the Office of Management and Budget several years ago as their Privacy Act Desk officer. And what I saw was a very disturbing trend at that point, and that's continued in terms of what I've seen in privacy across government is folks are looking for the not our problem card. And unfortunately, there's a perception of if you contract it out, it's not our problem. So unfortunately, that's the first thing you have to combat. And again, to kind of get into a more recent issue, even more so than contractors and third parties, I'm actually seeing a disturbing trend where grantees aren't what they used to be. From when I was at SSA, grantees, it really was kind of a fire and forget. You do a block grant, the money goes out there, they go do their thing, you may inject a little bit of data, there's a basic understanding of the controls. What I'm seeing across government and in certain parts of HHS are grantees doing inherently federal work with inherently federal data. In terms of what we're doing, very initially I'm trying to raise awareness of that issue. I'm raising it with OMB, I'm raising it across HHS. That's a starting point. There's also a lot of work being done in terms of including grantees in some of the contract language that we're trying to develop. That's the best we're going to do for now. At the root of it, I still believe that an inherent problem is in a contractor or grantee situation, we still don't have a complete picture of what actually is going over to them. There's not an enterprise view in terms of how that's flowing, getting to them. Once you have that, that allows you to have a more rational discussion about what controls to put on them, because right now, the baseline would be you just say comply with FSMA, do everything. That may not always be necessary. Until we have that data map, until we have that understanding, that's going to be the key towards saying, okay, we actually understand our relationship with you at this very high level, and we have a standard baseline of if this, then that. So unfortunately, not enough yet, but absolutely a recognition we need to do more.
Any other questions for Matt? Okay, thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
This concludes our event today. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Appreciate it.